Hello again, friends. And you are our friends, and welcome back to another edition of Jim Cornette's Drive Thru right here, wherever you happen to be on this beautiful sunny day. I'm going to assume it's beautiful and sunny wherever it is that you are. I'm your host, the great Brian Last. I'll be reading your questions to the man who will attempt to answer these questions, some of them sent many times to CornyDriveThru@gmail.com, and some even on Twitter using the hashtag CornyDriveThru. He is the exalted one of the cult of Cornette, Mr. Jim Cornette.
You have just basically asserted that you know what the weather is everywhere, and that nobody is now experiencing rain or storms or even cold. I'm sure it's cold somewhere in the world. We've got people, Mason Krieger could be flying around Antarctica. Well, he's not flying these days, but you never know. So don't presume, Brian Last, that you know what everybody's weather is, and just because it happens to be all sunshine, lollipops, rainbows, and waterfalls where you are, that everybody else is so lucky. I mean, you know, how egotistical of you to presume that you can just tell everybody what their weather is.
Who the hell do you think you are?
I mean, seriously.
Well, as we all know, my ego is way out of control, but on that topic...
Over the fence and far away.
Massive and out of control, but on that topic, I will say, and as I say this, I feel bad because we're not going to ask his question properly, but I was going through some of the emails of questions, and one of them came in from Kathmandu.
Well, what do Catman do these days? I haven't seen Catman in a long time.
The actual location, not the Bob Seger song.
Okay, no, wait. What? First of all, is Kathmandu a country, a continent, a village of fucking what entity is Catman? Is that a city?
You're going to make me have to find this question because I don't remember any of these details.
Well, now this is your goddamn story. You were telling it. I'm just holding its head on this one. But you make a fucking statement like Kathmandu. I didn't even know for sure that Kathmandu was a real place. Is it like take Outer Mongolia and turn right? Where do you go to Kathmandu?
Okay. I got some information here. I found the email. I'm sorry. I'll read the question, actually. I'll see what you think of this. We'll start off right away with a question. This is a new one.
Well, there you go. Start right off with what the program's supposed to be. How the fuck did we do this?
I am sorry. This may be a little long, but I just wanted to say how much I appreciate the podcast. My name might be a little hard to pronounce, so just call me ASM. That's my band's name, too, by the way. Cheap plug. The lockdown was fun because of this podcast, so first and foremost, thank you. Mad love to you guys from Kathmandu, Nepal. So that answers your question.
Oh, so Kathmandu is in Nepal.
Nepal.
Where the fuck would you go to find Nepal? I've heard that name, but I'm not sure where it is in the world. It sounds like a place where they'd have monks, like Tibet.
I believe that is actually kind of exactly what it is.
Well, there you see. I'll tell you what, I'm smarter than a lot of people give me credit for. Go ahead.
It's in South Asia. I know that. So here's his question. Ric Flair famously called Bruno Sammartino the Northeast champion, referring to the fact that Bruno could only ever draw in that area. No doubt Bruno was one of the pioneers of wrestling in the last century, but could he have done insane numbers in North Carolina had he had a match there? Thank you for taking my question. I promise to write more and tell you about watching wrestling here in Kathmandu in the 1990s, which was wild. We were on a 3-week delay and kayfabe wasn't broken till 2000. Haha, good times. Regards, ASM.
Well, so the question is, could Bruno have drawn the same house, as he said, in Charlotte as in... Well, no, because for one thing, in the 60s, there was no place to put 20,000 people in Charlotte indoors. So that would have been tough. Flair called Bruno the Northeast champion, obviously, because Flair has a soft spot and a lot of respect for the NWA championship. And to be quite honest, strictly speaking, and to the letter of the law, that's what it was. Bruno was the champion in the Northeast. The NWA during its heyday was the NWA champion was a champion in the majority of the United States, plus a number of different countries, Canada, New Zealand, Australia, Japan, etc. So it was more widely recognized. But because of the ridiculous numbers at the gate that Bruno put up in so many of those Northeastern cities for so long, and he was so over, that doesn't do it justice to what he did. Maybe everybody else that ever held it, well, there wasn't a lot of everybody's. It was mostly Bruno for 15 fucking years or whatever. But, Billy Graham, Pedro Morales, definitely Stan Stasiak, whatever, they were the Northeastern champion, but Bruno was the biggest gate attraction in the business. If he didn't pass that back and forth with Andre, given the year, or perhaps on a couple of years, the NWA champion. But I can see where Flair would say that, and technically it is indeed true, but that ignores the just ludicrous gate attraction that Bruno Sammartino was for so many years, longer, and for the entirety of his career. When you go back and look, his rookie year, or maybe his first 2 years, he wasn't on the top 10 box office attraction list, and for the next 18 or 19 until he retired full time for good, the only time he wasn't in the top 10 was when he actually took a year off or whatever. I mean, he was huge from the time he started till the time he finished. And, so many people remember him because of that population. So that's a once in a lifetime thing. It's never going to fucking happen again. Well, maybe twice in a lifetime. Londos did pretty good also.
Who was on more covers of the magazines? The NWA champion or Bruno?
Bruno.
Because that's one of the reasons he was able to go to another place like Indianapolis, because obviously there wasn't a massive Italian population there clamoring for Bruno Sammartino, but the fans there who saw the magazines would have seen Bruno there, and you saw the advanced publicity that, he was built up like a world-renowned superstar early in his career.
Well, but also, and when I say Bruno, maybe if you added up every NWA champion during the period that Bruno was WWF champion together, maybe they would be on more covers than, but Bruno was the guy because he was the guy in New York, and magazines were centered in New York. But also they sold more magazines in New York because there was more people in New York. But it wasn't just the magazines. Think about this. It wasn't, in those days, you didn't know who was hot in a particular territory. If you were in the Carolinas, unless you had a pen pal in Tennessee, you didn't know what was going on in the main events. But think about this. From 1962 until 1978, if you knew a wrestling fan from New York or Philadelphia or Boston or Baltimore or Pittsburgh or, half of the top 10 biggest cities in the United States that you ever spoke to, whether a friend or family or somebody moved in town or whatever, all you heard about was Bruno Sammartino. So it's more than just the magazines. For 15 years, can you imagine how many fucking people from the Northeastern United States filtered out all over the place? And now the question is, could he have done it anywhere else? The answer is yes and no, I think. A guy that was that strong, and people forget that he was one of the strongest men in the world when he first that's how he got started in wrestling and caught Rudy Miller's attention in Pittsburgh, was the publicity for his strongman shit. He had the backstory. He obviously could have a match that Bruno Sammartino would fucking have. He looked the part. He did his shit. He didn't go in there and do goddamn cartwheels like Morales or whatever. Bruno wasn't a cartwheel guy. But what pushed him over the top in the Northeast was the Italian connection and the immigrants and the minorities. And it was tailor-made for Bruno because of Rocca. They just followed the same pattern. But the reason why he was not any type of super draw in other territories, when he went to Houston, it didn't really work. He worked a different style. when he went to Indianapolis, I saw those matches, a lot of them on television. And he was over like fucking God because he was Bruiser's tag team partner and they were bumping the Valiant brothers around, or Ernie Ladd, fucking Von Raschke, whatever. So, I mean, at that point in time, during Bruiser's hot period, everything that happened in the ring, the people were throwing babies near. He was a huge deal to do the San Francisco Battle Royal that year because he almost never appeared on the West Coast. So that was a draw one time. But you have to understand.
He won the LA Battle Royal too.
Well, yeah, and he won the LA Battle Royal. But here's the thing. Except for Toronto, where he went when he was banished by Vince Sr. that time, they got sideways with each other. He went to Toronto and got over and drew money. It wasn't New York. It was a different country. It was still a heavy Italian population, but even as a rookie, he drew money there. That's why he got brought back to New York. He never went anywhere else again in his life, in his career, where he was anything other than presented as being one of the biggest stars in the business. He never had to go anywhere else and get over from scratch. So whenever he went into a different territory, he worked like Bruno worked. Because in the Northeast, that's what they expected. They were taught, they were educated to it, they wanted to see it. That's what worked for him. And that was the style of the territory because they built a lot of it around him. So he'd go to other territories and he wouldn't be necessarily as impressive to those fans as somebody who worked the Wilder style or the more technical style or whatever the style of that territory was. But he was still, it was like Marlon Brando coming in to be in your goddamn local, high school play. He was still as big a star as fucking 3/4 of the guys on the rest of the card put together. So, gosh, would he have been able to get over in a different territory from scratch if nobody knew who he was and he went there and had to do it, all over again? Depends on the territory. In the 70s, definitely in Detroit for the Sheik, he could have got over. I don't know about Tennessee. I don't think he would have, been going along with Jackie Fargo's Hard Ways and Falderall. But it would depend on the territory. But he was a big talent. It needed to be. He needed to be in a territory where it played to his strengths, and New York was the perfect place. That's why it was the magic combination, and they were never able to fucking reenact that.
Was there ever a wrestler who didn't own a piece of the territory who had as much power as Bruno Sammartino?
No. Fuck no, ever. Because not only getting a percentage, even if he felt like he got fucked on him, still being one of the 2 or 3 highest paid wrestlers in the business, depending on the year. He got a percentage of the towns. He worked the towns that he wanted to. Nobody, and the biggest markets in the country, doing the biggest grosses. Nobody else had that kind of pull.
How much resentment you think there was from Rocca? That all of a sudden Bruno was being put in matches with him as a partner, and then Bruno just completely took over the Northeast, especially New York, Madison Square Garden.
It's like Rocca was the old dog that was starting to droop a little bit, but he was still the king of the yard. And all of a sudden, here came the new frisky puppy. And the new puppy may have been friendly, but the old dog wasn't happy. And within, a year and a half, Rocca went from being the biggest star of the biggest arena of the biggest city in the country to working opposition in Jersey City, and Bruno Sammartino was the champion in the biggest building in the biggest city in the country. From the outhouse to the penthouse, or vice versa, whichever that can happen in wrestling.
No, I've been to Jersey City. That's certainly the outhouse.
Yeah.
No dispute there.
I'm in a reasonably good mood this morning. No one has ticked me off today. The birds were chirping when I got up this morning. It looks like the Disney movie here at the castle. I've gotten some work done. I've been catching up on some things over the past few days. Evaded all of the people. Why do people shoot off the goddamn fireworks for the 4th of July? I can understand going to see a fireworks exhibition, professionally done, a show. I can't understand going to see it now in this fucking day and age with other people, but in the past, go see a fucking show, go see a fucking movie. Why fucking fire off goddamn incendiary devices and flammable material in your fucking fireway or your driveway or your backyard or your kids blowing their fucking fingers off? Did you ever blow off fireworks when you were a young person?
All the time, yeah.
Why?
On July 4th, when I was a kid?
Yeah.
Well, my dad had a connection, and he brought home, like, these amazing fireworks that were highly illegal in New York State. And we would have people come over, and we would light them off, and I didn't know any better. I was a kid. I mean, it's one thing if it's July 4th. What I'm wondering is, what's up with these people that are setting these off on July 3rd? All of a sudden, the other night, there are fireworks going off. I'm like, what? It's not even July 4th yet.
They got to practice. We had that too. It was a bam, bam. It wasn't the big thing. But no, I'm sorry. When I was a kid, first time I saw fireworks, you know what I thought? You know what my perception was, the whole thing? It's loud. It's fucking fire. It's explosion. I could get hurt. And I've stayed as far away from anybody with a goddamn firework in their fucking hands. They can lose their finger. I still have all my fingers. As a matter of fact, when I was in the first grade, I learned this early. When I was in the first grade, my first grade teacher said, I want you to count to 10. And I held up both my hands and I went 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And I counted to 10. And she said, no, you're cheating. Put your hands in your pocket and count to 10. And I went 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. What the fuck? Anyway, so you can lose your fucking hands, your fingers, your eyesight. What was that, a depth charge? What happened?
Your story there was quite
amazing. It took a second for it, but anyway.
A depth charge.
I don't understand why anybody would want to blow off fireworks on their fucking own. You could put your eye out with that thing.
Hey, what's it like being in the ring when they're going off around you?
I've always despised them. And that's one reason why my tinnitus is so bad in my right ear, my bad ear, because of that fucking TNA insisted on blowing off as much pyro as possible in that closet in Orlando at the fucking studio to try to compete with Vince McMahon, and it fucking like to defend me. It's especially, I hated it in the WWF, but it's especially bad when the smaller companies try to make up for their lack of size with pyro and you're in a fucking small place. I wasn't real happy with a lot of Ring of Honors, but I understand you had to fucking do this shit. But I hate that stuff. That's one thing you'll never fucking find Jim Cornette having his head set on fire in a Pepsi commercial. I stay far away from those type of things.
They say that Michael Jackson tried to put out the flames by doing a couple quick spins.
I thought that was some kind of segue.
That was no joke or anything. That was a credible
statement.
That was a factual statement.
It would fucking, if he did the and fucking grabbed his crotch and spun around twice real quick, it would put his fucking flaming head out.
I don't know if he was doing his weird sounds yet. That really was more introduced on the Bad album. But yeah.
Oh, no, wait a minute. Now you have a fucking chronology of Michael Jackson's career pre and post having his head set on fire.
Yes.
I remember, no, the fucking Off the Wall album. He's doing all kinds of hip, hoop, hip.
But he didn't really introduce like the ridiculous, like Shamon, like none of that was really introduced.
Shaka Zulu. Shaka Zulu.
Well, he didn't do that, but none of that was introduced until the Bad album.
Cojones. 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 Shaka Zulu. Cojones.
Did you like the Jacksons when you were a kid?
Yes. Shake your body all the way down to the ground.
Well, you were a teenager by that point.
Well, yeah. Well, okay. I liked the Jacksons. I liked the Jackson 5.
Did you watch the cartoon?
I did watch the cartoon. Oh, baby, give me one more chance to show you that I love you. Won't you please let me back in your heart? Oh, darling, I was blind to let you go, baby. But now, since I've seen you in his arms, I want you back.
Well, it's never sounded so white as it just did.
Well, no, wait. Hey, Michael was paler than I am right now by the time he got finished.
That's true.
Michael was translucent at one point. You could see right through, just like you could see right through a lot of people these days. He was translucent.
Talking about blowing people's fingers off, he blew his nose off. He had no nose at the end.
He didn't blow it off. It just fell off because he'd had it sanded and regrouted so many times. That's terrible.
He had a prosthetic nose that he had to wear whenever he was out in public, acting like a weirdo.
Well, I'll tell you what nose don't fall off of what face, and that is my brand new action figure variant. The nose is glued on and will stay there. See how I went into the merchandise update on the segue there? See, for you, Brian, like that smooth criminal.
Once again, off the bad album. Yes.
Yeah, well, there you go. It was a very bad album. Anyway, I've been a bad boy as far as not getting people their merchandise, and we're correcting that. As a matter of fact, have almost completely corrected that. As we mentioned last week on The Experience, if you've ordered something from Cornette's Collectibles that does not involve the new action figure variant, that stuff is already in the mail, has been in the mail for several days. And if you haven't already got it, you will get it, except if you're international, in which case it's going to take a while. I'm hearing international packages are arriving exactly 2 months after I mailed them. That used to take 2 to 3 weeks. It's not everything like that, but allow extra time, even though I was lagging at the start. And also, over the last day or so, about 100, the first 100 packages of action figures have been assembled and taped up and labeled and are ready on Monday morning, which is, today, as the people hear this. Monday, July 6th, the first shipment starts going out. And, of course, I figured out I can't get all these goddamn things in my fucking truck. Do you know what 100 boxed action figures looks like? It looks like a lot of shit. So, anyway, we're going to be going every morning. We're going to be doing a ferry thing, not like Tinkerbell the ferry, but like the ferry that crosses the Mersey. And we're going to be ferrying stuff every day back and forth to the post office. We're going to try to get everything out, except maybe all the internationals this week. And they will follow next week, and we will be on target by mid-July to once again open up the Cornette's Collectibles store at jimcornette.com to new business after we have cleared the backlog and restocked. I've never seen so many goddamn shipping supplies and mailing supplies and T-shirts. I challenge you people when we reopen the store, fucking run me out of something this time. No, I shouldn't say that. I'll cause trouble. But anyway, so that's the update for everybody. And thank you. And folks who have emailed me about various things and address confirmations and some things I'm going to be getting with you over the next few days. I love you all. I love you all. Love is in the air.
We'll be back with more of the drive-thru after this short commercial timeout.
What?
Hey kids, are you having fun with your figures toy company Jim Cornette action figure? Well, just when you think you couldn't have any more fun,
it's the Jim Cornette playsets.
Now you can have Jim react to his everyday environments like
the post office.
Comes with dolly and ninja suit. Like Beauty Soul Temple. Pretend Jim is sending out 150 international orders that day and some vacuous mouth-breathing cretin is getting too close. Hey, see that line behind you on the floor? It's where you need to be. Space. Coming soon, bring in John the Hunchback. Soul Temple. Then there's the Jim Cornette home office. Memorabilia sold separately. Pretend that Jim is going out to the garage. Sold separately. To get some more merchandise that he can't mention on his podcast. Open the garage door to let Bertie Sanders in and out. Bertie Sanders sold separately. Pretend that Jim needs new rolling shelves when he runs out of space for his current supplies. Goddamn, I have so many supplies that I need rolling shelves with wheels on them. Rolling shelves are cool. Sold separately. And now for the older kids,
it's the Jim Cornette hot tub playset.
Comes with bathrobe and pipe. Have fun in the hot tub. Fun sold separately.
It's the Jim Cornette playsets.
Well, there we hear it. Coming soon, the Cornette's Collectibles, the Jim Cornette playsets. Thank you, Rocky the Ramone, for sending that.
Oh, God damn it, Rocky. You bastard, you motherfuckers, I had not heard that. I had no idea where you were going with that. Oh, Christ, well, now my face hurts. Well, you got to take over for a minute. I need a Sip of Sprite Zero, sold separately.
Sold separately. Bernie Sanders sold separately. How about that?
Bernie finally got tired of not being able to access the Birdie condo whenever he wanted if the garage door was down. So he's put up a summer place out in the Evergreen right outside the garage door. So I can still hear him chirp, but he has full access.
Figures toy company had trouble making a tennis racket. Good luck making a tiny bird.
Now we're talking about tennis rackets now. That could be coming in the future.
Oh, see, there we go.
Sold separately.
Tennis playset. That's right. About time. Well, we got a lot of questions sent in, obviously, as always, Jim, but let's go with a few of the very popular topics that several people have sent in questions about here at the top of the show. One of the ones we've heard from a lot of people is about Shayna Baszler, who has disappeared from WWE TV. Have you been following this at all?
Well, actually, just within the past few days, I saw something on either the internet or Twitter that to the effect that she had disappeared from WWF television. And I don't know why otherwise than somebody also said, well, Vince doesn't like her. And that's the sum total of what I know here. So what is the accusation?
Well, here's one of the emails sent in the CornyDriveThru at gmail.com from Jack Burton, the Pork Chop Express. I don't know if that's his band or his tag team or what that is. She hasn't been on television in some time. While I thought maybe it had to do with COVID-19, everything I've read suggests it was a call made by Vince McMahon himself. Given her legit MMA background, I think the decision is ludicrous, but I do see two significant events that may have played into the decision. One, Paul Heyman's removal from Power in Creative, since Baszler was a project of his. And two, Becky's pregnancy and departure, which basically robbed Baszler of her most prominent on-screen rival. I know some people think Shayna lacks personality and promo ability, and I also realize she'll turn 40 this August. But
Holy shit, is she that old?
I guess so. This is the first I've seen that.
I was not aware. She don't look it.
But I certainly feel like WWE could get something significant out of her if they just bothered to really try. I'd just like to hear your insight on her and her current predicament, and what you believe might be her best course of action at this point in time. And like I said, Jim, we received several questions about Shayna, and they all kind of are tackling the same issue, which is that Vince McMahon made the decision to just take her off TV, just not use her anymore. And apparently this is not related, reportedly, you never know what'll turn up, not related to the coronavirus or anything else. It was just, he didn't want her on the show anymore.
But now, do we have somebody putting the words that are coming out of Vince McMahon's mouth, I don't like her, I don't want her on the show? Or is this just the fact that she has disappeared and Vince has the final call over whatever goes on the show?
I think it has been reported by some wrestling journalists that Vince McMahon made the call to pull her off the shows.
Well, I'm trying to figure out a way to defend Vince in this, but it doesn't sound good. I don't know. Okay, the only thing I can understand is if Heyman was high on her and they drop Paul Lee and Bruce wants to do different shit, I can see her not being Bruce's cup of tea, because Bruce would think that the women should look like the divas looked, and instead of like the fucking new women look. I just, except for when they had her do the fucking vampire bite gimmick on Becky Lynch, and that was somewhat preposterous and not believable. Everything I'd seen of Shayna Baszler, she looked good. Her matches were good. She has a different style because she's got the MMA background, but she looks like she can kick some ass. And I don't know why you would, even if you didn't want to feature her as the top girl, why would you just take her completely off instead of, she's already in that position, move her down the card, but still use her? Is there something else going on, or just something real personal that you just say, no, I just don't want to use her anymore? I don't get that. Especially with some of the women they are using. But those women look more like Vince and Bruce's idea of what the women are supposed to look like. Like that, what the fuck is her name that's about as Southern as the fucking socks I'm wearing right now? The Southern Belle?
Lacey Evans.
Lacey Evans. Fucking hell. Lacey Underall.
Caddyshack, yeah.
Well, thank you very much. Biggest hoarder in 3 counties, I've heard. But, I don't know. I have no idea. But I've always enjoyed... And did they break up? See, I can't watch 5 of these shows that are 2 and 3 hours apiece every week, obviously, and still be able to fucking function as a normal adult. They had the 4 horsewoman or the horsewomen thing going with her and who Marina Shaffer and Jessamine Duke. What's happened to them? When we watched something about a year or so ago, they had a group. They were doing great shit. They all looked completely different than the rest of the women, but they could do their sort of like, they looked to me like a fucking female version of O'Reilly, Fish, and fucking Cole. But anyway, what happened to them?
And by the way, I don't know because I haven't seen them on it. They have not been on NXT. They didn't go up to the main roster with Shayna Baszler, and I have not seen them on NXT in the weeks that we've been watching it again. And every now and then when I flip past the channel, I haven't seen them. So I don't know what's happened to them. And obviously the other horsewoman was Ronda Rousey, and she's long gone.
Well, I will. I mean, it didn't look to me like that the other 2 were rotten or anything, or were just there just like the Mean Street Posse just because they were friends with Shane, and I'm not knocking those guys, but, that's why they were there. I think that, the other girls, like I said, looked like they had the fucking goods and looked different and worked different. So I don't know why you just dropped them once Rousey was gone. I will make a blanket statement that unless we just don't know that
Shayna Baszler.
Help me, that Shayna Baszler, I'm trying there. Unless we just don't know that Shayna Baszler is somehow just horrible to deal with and do business with, and they just got fed up and said, fuck it, which nobody has ever said. Taking her off television with especially with some of the other girls that they are already using, is fucking ridiculous. She was real and legitimate and believable and looked like a badass heel to me.
Yeah, she was good. I don't know why.
So, well, I guess because she doesn't have fucking the corner of the market on the fucking plastic surgery and doesn't have Sable's white cotton panties on or whatever the fuck. I don't know with Vince and Bruce and all of their various issues with the divas.
Well, on the topic of women's wrestling in the WWE, we got this email sent in to CornyDriveThru@gmail.com from Abraham Hernandez in San Diego. Why in the hell do you show zero respect to the greatest female wrestler of all time, Sasha Banks? It literally only took her 2 weeks to end AEW. She was the first one to outperform Jericho in head-to-head ratings. Now Jericho's crying all over Twitter, making excuses. And the following week, she severely outperformed the entire Fyter Fest card. Your bias has never been any more apparent than in your constant praise of Charlotte, who has less wrestling ability in her entire body than Sasha has in her pinky.
Wait, what?
Not to mention Sasha Banks is infinitely more popular and marketable. Wake up, Jim! The best worker in the industry is female. And obviously there's some subjective facts in there, but also there's some
wait a minute. What is that?
Facts,
are those like alternative facts? Subjective facts?
Well, there's subjective and objective in there, and the point being that her being on NXT has coincided with NXT winning in the ratings against AEW.
Well, it's also coincided with AEW doing particularly wretched stench of death television programs. But I never said that Sasha Banks sucked. I haven't watched Sasha Banks because she hasn't fucking had a match against Charlotte or Rhea Ripley, which are the 2 girls that I've been able to stomach of that roster up there. Because is somebody else, have you ever heard anybody else say that Sasha Banks is the greatest women's wrestler in the world?
I have not. And I do think that Sasha's very good. I think she's very marketable, but I think that's a bit of a stretch.
Okay, well, the point is it takes 2 to tango, And when I see Sasha Banks against Charlotte, or Sasha Banks against Rhea Ripley, or formerly Sasha Banks against Becky Lynch, I might be predisposed to watch that. But when I see Sasha Banks against another of the interchangeable young Japanese, either schoolgirls or kabuki dancers, they got to be one or the other. Can't just have Gail Kim come out there and fucking...
That's not fair. Io Shirai isn't a Japanese schoolgirl or one of the kabuki dancers. She is a Japanese women's wrestler, but she's unique in her own way.
All right. Well, anyway, there's too many. I get them confused. So if they put Sasha Banks in a main event against somebody else that I'm interested in, then I will watch her. And if she does very well, then later on I will watch her against people that I might not necessarily be interested in, because she will have impressed me in the past. But so far I ain't said, was she in that fucking ladder fiasco?
You know, this is a problem with modern wrestling. I don't remember.
Yeah. I mean, you know, and by the way, we didn't even billboard at the top of the program. Later on today, we're going to do a watch along of the Midnight Express Southern Boys from the Great American Bash 1990. And I know a lot of people are going to say, is Ollie going to watch Midnight Express matches? No, it's just that I happen to know the inside workings of these and that the people find it interesting. But we're going to be doing a variety of those things. But we can remember matches from 30 years ago, but not what we looked at last month, because that's the problem. And I'm not even being racist or sexist. I'm being gimmickist here. If you have multitudes of people with the same or similar gimmicks and looks and outfits and presentation in the two major companies, none of those people are truly going to stand out, except to the fucking people who are so goddamn nerdish that they will do statistics on people's fucking, driver's licenses. And, but she once defeated, fucking Tojo Yamamoto for the Dragon Dream Gate All Japan Pro Women's Teenage and Under 14 Championship. What the fuck? So the point is, nobody else looks like Charlotte. Nobody else looks like Rhea Ripley. Nobody looked like Becky Lynch.
No one looks like Sasha.
Well, no one looks like Sasha? Well, good. When she works with one of those people that doesn't look like 15 other people, I'll watch her. I don't have anything against her. So that's the answer to that question. I don't have anything against her. She hasn't crossed the radar yet. Unless she was in that fucking ladder fiasco, in which case I have a healthy disappreciation for any of those people involved in all that stuff.
I will say that I have found Sasha and Bayley as heels to be highly entertaining together.
Oh, and I forgot Bayley. I haven't seen her in a while, but remember, I very much enjoyed watching Bayley work. I thought she was so over as a babyface. Somehow they managed to botch that up. And then
she's been good as a heel. She's been pretty good.
I was about to say, but then the last time I saw her, last few times, she's been a heel. And she's another girl that works more like a guy, which is a compliment. And she seems to get it. And she's not just a plastic manufactured cookie cutter girl. She has her own look and her own thing, and she can work. So, they're out there.
Well, some have said that Chris Jericho was so upset by the fact that his segment lost in the ratings to Sasha Banks' segment that he just wanted to ride away. He just wanted to get away as far away as he could from wrestling.
Well, you know what's good for that, Brian? If you just want to get out in the woods, go out in the park, commune with nature, don't have to worry about using gasoline, destroying the environment, or fucking even having a fucking driver's license, you get one of these rad power bikes we've been talking about. So, Chris, they could make a whole segment on AEW with one of these rad power bikes where they ran each other over and then they did stunts on them and everything. But you don't have to do a stunt on a rad power bike. You just have to get on it and go. You can go up to 20 miles an hour without pedaling, folks, so you can get out and about without getting all sweaty. And the thing about rad power bikes is they are half the price of the other e-bikes, the electric bikes in the market today. All of them under $1,500. So whether you want to go out in the park, commune with nature, commute short distances, haul some groceries. Even, as we mentioned, Brian, you can strap some kind of giant bucket apparatus on your back and carry your kids around. Big Bubba Rogers could have strapped a bucket of any food that you care to name from any country on earth and ridden across any other starving country and been unmolested because nobody would have caught him on one of these rad power bikes. Plus, they've got dedicated U.S.-based customer support 7 days a week to answer any questions. Makes the perfect gift for somebody who likes being active. Rad power bikes, and for a limited time only, right now, you can get a free accessory with the purchase of a rad power bike. It's up to $100 in value and free shipping to the contiguous 48 states. All you got to do is text the word Jim, that's my name, J-I-M, to 64,000. That's 64 with 3 zeros coming right after it. 64,000. Text Jim and get a free accessory with the purchase of a bike. And they've got flexible financing for as low as 0% APR. Flexible finance. They are as flexible as a contortionist in a sideshow. They'll bend up like a pretzel for you.
Once again, rad power bikes.
Yeah, that's what Jericho ought to get on, and he ought to just, you know what he ought to do? As penance for being involved in that football field match, Chris just ought to get on one of these rad power bikes and just have to do 20 laps around the fucking football field. Just go buddin' all the way around.
I don't think that's enough of a punishment. He may have to use a real bike for that and pedal and do some work.
Well, you know, as a matter of fact,
enjoy himself on a rad power bike.
Yeah, it's too enjoyable. Put him on a regular bike and make him suffer for it. And then put a screen where he has to watch the match over and over in front of himself while he's doing it.
Well,
rad power bikes.
Rad power bikes, 64,000 to, or text Jim to 64,000.
You have text Jim. That's my name to 64,000. That's 64000 for those of you, and there's no comma in there, I'm told.
Well, Jim, another question we've received from a lot of listeners is, what is your thoughts on Luke Gallows and Karl Anderson signing with Impact?
Well, as I understand it, they can also keep their Japanese deal. Is that correct?
Well, yeah, they'll have to get a new Japanese deal, but they'll be able to do.
Oh, I thought that I had read that one of the reports that they had signed with Impact on the theory that they could still work for New Japan, but they've got to work that out with New Japan. Is New Japan pissed at them?
No. I'm just saying
they could.
I'm just saying you make it sound like it's a pre-existing agreement, and they could just go and do that. But I think they just now are coming to that point where they're able to negotiate.
Well, that's true, because it's been right at 3 months since they've been fucked, right?
Approximately.
I'm just going to go on record as saying if I was Luke Gallows or Karl Anderson, I would have gotten in my fucking car. I would have driven to Stamford. I would have had some type of explosive device and a baseball bat in the back seat of the car, and I would have gone in first with the bat and done as much as I could, and then fucking planted the explosive in the fucking parking garage right under Sergeant Slaughter's camouflage limousine. It's probably still there like it was 20 years ago with 4 flat tires. Those motherfuckers. No, don't leave and go sign this deal that you want to take. No, we'll give you more and more money. No, do not go where you want to go and do what you want to do. Here's a bunch of money to stay here, more money than you've ever made in your life. Okay, we'll take it. And 2 months later, on the flimsiest of excuses, when they can't fucking get that deal because there are no deals to be gotten of that kind because there's no shows, et cetera, they get, oh, we got to let you go. I would have given a motherfucker brain damage over that. I can't imagine being as big as Gallows and Anderson and being able to have the restraint to not murder somebody. And I mean, and who's going to stop those motherfuckers if they really wanted to, right? I would say that would be a fucking Patera and Saito at the goddamn McDonald's fucking in the Super 8 or the XLN situation where you'd need about 10 or 12 motivated fucking security officers to hold those two motherfuckers back from committing some mayhem.
Well, look on the bright side. At least they don't have to go back to Saudi Arabia.
Well, apparently that's fucking optional also, when some people have said, no, fuck you, I ain't going to Saudi Arabia. It depends on who they are, obviously. They have to have some stroke, as they say. But in all seriousness, no, fuck you a million times. I would, something like that, where then, okay, these guys say, okay, we could have taken this deal, but we'll take this deal because it's the money, our families, whatever. And then 3 months later, oh, fuck you. You wanted to leave, so that's obviously why they fucking let him go, because they wanted to leave, and now they know, well, shit's changed, so we don't need him as bad as we did 3 months ago. Fuck you, fuck you, fuck you. I would hire a gypsy to put a curse on the WWF, WWE, Vince, whoever told me this fucking news. I would commit physical mayhem. My God. So the answer to the question of well, they've signed with Impact just to be on a television program, I'm sure, for right now. I would obviously imagine it's something like everybody else signs with Impact. It's kind of like almost all the MLW, almost all the contracts except for AEW or WWE, where you can do whatever the fuck you want to do as long as you give the primary company first right of refusal on a date or whatever. I do not think it's very restrictive, nor definitely is it full-time, because show me who's running a full-time schedule. So they're going to make appearances for them, and they're going to be on television. It can't help but add to the program to have those guys there. And I'm sure they'd probably just like to go back to Japan, which I'm pretty sure that they probably like and enjoy and has been less bullshit for them than what they've had to deal with in fucking America, as sad to say as that is.
All right, well, another popular question sent in by many people. I'll read one of their questions. This was sent to CornyDriveThru@gmail.com from Greg in Northern California. Recently, Taz took a shot at the WWE for its poor COVID-19 testing.
Sloppy shop!
And infected talent. It was quoted by Dave Meltzer and picked up by mainstream press that WWE is reportedly furious with Taz over his sloppy shop comment. Over which part do you believe the WWE is more upset? That the WWE is getting called out for its poor handling of the COVID-19 testing? Or that AEW has had reportedly no issues and that its talent is taking precautionary measures while the WWE have serious problems? Do you believe that by highlighting Taz's comments, it makes the WWE more of a shit show for their previous testing procedures?
Well, first of all, the question was, between the two of them, is the WWE upset because they're being called out and having bad PR, or because AEW hadn't had any positives? Obviously, it's the former, the first one. They don't want the bad PR. I don't think that they're wishing anybody in AEW gets sick. And to be honest, if Vince heard about it, I don't know that he'd lose any sleep over it if it happened, either one. But no, they don't like bad publicity. They don't like bad PR. And Vince is very Trumpian in that he thinks if he just says things, that they will, perception is reality. That's Vince's favorite saying. So if now that they have realized that they should have taken it more seriously, and it, they're being, that's the one thing that Tony Khan has done well, is spend the money. And not only spend the money, it's not like Vince doesn't have the money, but just have the motivation to do the actual legitimate testing and et cetera that they've done, because Vince is so Trumpian. He thinks it's no big deal, and he doesn't want to put illness over, and he doesn't like the masks and everything. Vince is with that crackpot crowd. So now that it's bit him in the ass, that's the worst thing, is where people are noticing it and talking about it. and that's what they hate. What was the second part of the question? I'm not sure where they went with that.
I'm not quite sure either what they were trying to say with that, but
yeah, but the point is, you would think that the industry leader and a publicly traded company, here's the thing, Tony Khan doesn't have to answer to any fucking stockholders, just Daddy. And Daddy said test, and Tony said test, so they can test. But here, a publicly traded company that's worth billions of dollars in the stock market intermittently and all this other stuff, they were just having everybody take their fucking temperature and let them know if they fucking had a runny nose. And it wasn't because they couldn't do it. It was because they weren't instructed to do it because they have Republican leadership. And that's not any surprise to anybody.
Well, on the topic of wanting good PR, here's a question from Twitter using the hashtag CornyDriveThru from Mark in Dryden. What does Jim think of WWE doing an about face and now fining talents in the crowd at tapings for not wearing masks?
What the fuck? Okay, I didn't hear about this. The last question we were asking, we were asked if Kevin Dunn really was telling people they couldn't fucking wear a mask or they weren't wrestling fans. And now they're fining people in the crowd for not wearing a mask? It has been 2 weeks.
I had not heard about the findings, but obviously after Kevin Dunn's comments was when all the positive tests came back.
And who is in the crowd? What is their admission procedure? Is it still friends and family, or is it, whoever fucking shows up at the back door when they need 60 people to fucking set in a spot? How are they determining who gets in the fucking arena now?
I'm not certain. I believe it's still friends and family and performance center personnel and wrestlers.
Well, then they all ought to be wearing a mask, because what the fuck? How many more people you need to get sick? So and here's the thing, can you fine a friend and a family?
No, you can only fine the people that are under contract to you.
So if fucking Uncle Joe just decides he's going to pull his fucking mask down, I mean, look at these stupid motherfuckers in the swimming pools and the beach parties and the fucking 4th of July festivities, and they're all in the fucking bikinis in Vegas slobbering all over each other or wherever the fuck. You think people are going to be smart enough and intelligent enough to wear a fucking mask when and if they could ever go back to wrestling? That fucking horse has already left the barn. I think the whole thing's doomed to shit. You know what? Come to think of it, I'm going out on a limb right now, and I'm saying that a plank that ought to be put in the Democratic platform, because we're going to have Joe Biden is going to be our next president unless Trump figures out a way to fucking steal it, whether he accepts enough help from foreign countries or botches the mail-in ballots or fucking flummoxes something else because of the criminals that he's got stooges in charge of the Justice Department and everything else. Joe Biden's going to be the next president. He needs to put a plank in the Democratic platform that it will be a mandatory $1,500 fine for any citizen of the United States being seen out in public without a mask on. And we will bankrupt these fucking Republican menaces. And then they will have it codified into law that you are committing assault on other people if you go out in public without a mask on, because your germs, your droplets, your spittle is being projected at another person. And I know, Brian Last, maybe not every state, but some states, it is actually considered assault to spit on another person. I've found these things out the hard way. So therefore, if your spittle goes on another person, then that person needs to have you arrested for assault, and there should be criminal penalties. And then after we've got that done, and we're controlling the spread of this deadly illness, then if somebody doesn't obey the law and cover their fucking nasty mouth up and gets their droplets on you and you get sick, if they break the law, or if somebody at a sporting event or somewhere else out in public doesn't cover their face up and they get their droplets on you and you take it and give it to your family, There's recourse for you. It's not just every man for himself. It's not just the wild, wild west anymore. No, there's somebody that you can call to take these perpetrators, these nasty, pestilence-ridden spreaders of disease, infectors, if you will, and they can be taken to court and they can be forced to pay you and compensate you for the illness that they have perpetrated on you and your family. And I can think of one man that can take these infectors to justice.
Call Stephen P. News. If you need to sue. An outlaw mud show or two. He'll sue the rest.
Yes, ladies and gentlemen, I've discovered one thing. It's Stephen P. New can get you compensated for anything in a court of law except just people being just generally stupid and ignorant. There's so many of those, and the discovery process would be so broad, and where do you start? But anything else besides just gross ignorance and stupidity, Stephen P. New can bring a man or woman to justice. And Stephen P. New wants to keep you healthy, not only from the COVID, from the coronavirus, but also from being poisoned by the big corporations that are currently, as we speak, literally polluting our air, our water, our soil. We mentioned, Brian, the town in West Virginia of a couple of hundred fine citizens. Almost everybody has cancer now because of the groundwater being poisoned by a mining company, leaving treacherous and hazardous materials in the ground, stuff you couldn't even put in the U.S. Postal Service, and they put it in the goddamn people's drinking water. But Stephen P. New at 888-692-8084, newlawoffice.com, has gotten millions and millions and millions of dollars in judgments for people who have been damaged, injured, compromised, and put upon by other people's greed, avarice, and general disdain for humanity and lack of empathy. That's one thing Stephen's got plenty of. It's empathy. Empathy and sympathy and sincerity. And sincerity is the key, and when you can fake that, you've got it made. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you need to navigate the treacherous, shark-filled legal waters of the American jurisprudence system, I say to you, you have no finer champion, no finer man to take up the sword of conquest and fight for your rights than Stephen P. New, 888-692-80, by God, 84.
That's right. Well, by God, let's get a few more questions in here. This was sent to CornyDriveThru at gmail.com from Ed Green. I'd like to know your thoughts on WWE purchasing Evolve Wrestling. I know that they've had a working relationship the last few years, but do you think this will have a ripple effect on other indie promotions? Is there a possibility, with WWE now owning Evolve's library, could Vince be opening himself up to lawsuits if wrestlers like the Young Bucks don't give their consent to show their likenesses on the network? Also,
I'd love to see that one.
Also, where do you think the acquisition will leave Gabe Sapolsky?
Well, multi-part question there. We talked about it a week or so ago. I said I wouldn't be surprised to see Gabe end up working with NXT somehow, because that's what he has done well and liked to do for the last, 15 years or however long, is work with young talent. And we talked about the style that he books best is the real niche independent style. It's not a mainstream style, but it's where a lot of those guys get started. And since they have plucked some of his talent, I think they probably, and worked with him, I think they would probably not have a problem with Gabe having a part in their training program, since loosely that's what he's been doing. So that's what Gabe might be doing. As far as buying Evolve, I'm sure they bought the tape library because some of their guys have come from there. I'm pretty doggone sure they're not going to run Evolve as a wrestling promotion. Am I mistaken there? Has somebody said something?
I have not heard anything about that.
Yeah, no, what they're doing is they're buying the trademark and the intellectual property and the tapes. And I would venture to guess that except I don't know the entire Evolve roster from scratch and what they have on tape, but I would say besides if somebody is really hot in the WWE at this point in time, it's going to be a while before anybody ever sees that stuff. If they ever do. They've got 200 hours of Smoky Mountain Wrestling. They put up like 12 that featured Storm and Jericho. They've got tons of stuff there. They just want to own it. And if one of those kids or guys that they've gotten from Evolve does make it big, then they've got tape that they can capitalize on. A lot of it's probably never going to be seen because I'm sure also it'll be used in even, my God, the Smoky Mountain Wrestling stuff where we had, tape of these guys in buildings in front of thousands of people in arenas like Knoxville Coliseum, whatever. They still use it like back when and the old smoke-filled arena and, happier days when they were trying and struggling type of thing. So what's it going to look like when they've got 100 people in a fucking nightclub? They
don't even use the OVW footage, really.
Well, yeah, only in, hey, here's Cena. And they've just now started with the Ruthless Aggression era where they use a few more clips. But no, they don't. It's only basically for documentaries. You could have the greatest match in the world, but if it's from a territory or from a low budget atmosphere, they're not going to fucking feature that on any, except for clips and in telling the story of this talent that went wherever. So they bought the library, probably wanted to help Gabe out. Have that now if they need it. I'm sure if Gabe's interested, I'm sure they'd probably be interested in speaking about something for him to do with NXT. But the Evolve is done as an active promotion, I would be pretty sure. Because why would they? They're already running NXT. Why would they want to run Evolve on top of that?
Well, beyond being a booker, I think if you look at Gabe Sapolsky in Ring of Honor and in Evolve, you could argue that he's been a really successful talent scout. He's found a lot of guys before WWE or AEW, obviously, or Impact or anyone else knew about them. And do you think this affects that? Does this affect his ability to discover new talent?
I don't think it affects his ability to discover new talent. I think whether they give him a job to do that or not affects his inclination to go out and discover new talent. If I was right now, he would just be doing it as a hobby. Was he going to go around to shows around the country and say, oh boy, that guy'd be great. If I had a company, I'd fucking, book him. I'll write his name down. No, but if they want to pay him to go around and do that, I bet you he could find some.
It is amazing the amount of guys that he booked in Ring of Honor and Evolve that you wouldn't think when you saw them like these guys are WWE wrestlers, not because they weren't good, but just because they maybe weren't big enough or they were wrestling in indie style. And almost all those big stars, the stars that he promoted as big stars in Ring of Honor, let's say, almost all of them, CM Punk, Bryan Danielson, Samoa Joe, all those guys ended up working for the WWE.
Well, and, and then some of the guys that he swore off ever booking again, low key. It's Teddy Hart. It's the exact opposite. He wanted guys that were coachable, that were smart, but were dedicated, not, problem children, that if you critiqued them, they would want to do better. Samoa Joe, Chris Hero, CM Punk, Bryan Danielson, all those guys you mentioned, Nigel McGuinness, all those guys fit into that kind of category. And that's why they succeeded not only in Ring of Honor, wherever Gabe was, but, when they went elsewhere because they had those qualities. And, but you can tell it when you're the booker of a small company, you can tell a lot about who you'd want to book again and who you wouldn't based on how much of a fucking pain in the ass they are to you when they're not even making any money. Because if a guy's a pain in the ass to you when nobody's really making any money, when somebody starts making money, he's going to be a bigger pain in the fucking ass.
Our next question, Jim, sent in to CornyDriveThru@gmail.com from Allie in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. This is one of those questions we talk about that's been sent in many times. According to the message here. This is the 10th time that Allie has sent this email in, so we'll give this a chance.
Damn your eyes, Brian Last. You should have got to this before now.
Well, let's see. Maybe there's a reason why it hasn't been on the air. We never know until we read it, so here's Allie's question. First off, I want to thank you for introducing me to old school wrestling, being that my oldest memories only went back to Survivor Series 1997. This question is with regards to whether you agree with my list of the Mount Rushmore for both WWE as well as the NWA. I made this list mainly based on the drawing power, impact on the business, as well as consistency as a top performer in the industry. For me, the Mount Rushmore for WWE consists of Hulk Hogan, Steve Austin, The Rock, and John Cena. Further, the Mount Rushmore for the NWA would consist of Ric Flair, Dusty Rhodes, Terry Funk, and Sting. Also, given that I've listened to over 10 plus hours of your content, I wanted you to explain to the younger fans why Terry Funk was important to the wrestling business and why you have always talked so highly of him. Thank you to Brian for reading this message.
Goddamn, what am I going to do, an hour and a half now just to scratch the surface on Funk, for heaven's sake? I think we've covered that. Not only Terry being a premier worker and being able to progress and change and do different things, from being a kid babyface in West Texas to being a sort of a heel but still a kind of a technical heel NWA champion, to being a fucking crazy fucking heel with Flair 10 years later, to being middle-aged and crazy in Smoky Mountain Wrestling and ECW, his older brother being a fucking great world champion, his father being one of the most influential people in pro wrestling history, etc., etc. But the whole Mount Rushmore thing it isn't like putting a hat on a hat. It's like the stadium that needs a match rather than the match that needs a stadium. Because you're drawing the analogy to Mount Rushmore, that means you got 4 people to work with. And if you only have 4 people to work with in not only just all of professional wrestling history or even a company, you can't do it. Because the WWF Mount Rushmore there just illustrated where was fucking Bruno. Because without Bruno, you wouldn't have had the rest of them. And he had more longevity. Of course, Hogan's been around longer now, but not steady and definitely not always popular. So then who do you leave off, Cena or The Rock? Or would it be because Austin instigated bigger business even though The Rock became a bigger movie star? It just doesn't work. It's a false analogy. With the NWA analogy, the NWA was so many different territories and different companies, but if you just want to go on NWA champions, then who was on that list?
The list was Ric Flair, Dusty Rhodes, Terry Funk, and Sting.
Help me, Lord Elizabeth, I'm coming.
Well, we could take Sting off that list right away.
Yeah, and it's no disrespect to Sting, but if you ask Sting, do you deserve to be one of the 4 biggest names in the history of the NWA? He'd ask you if you were on fucking acid.
Forget about that. What if you have a conversation with Lou Thez and he's expected to be on there?
Well, yeah.
Sorry, Lou, we had to get Sting on here.
We had to get Sting on, Lou. Maybe next time. And then, in all honesty, does a Mount Rushmore of the NWA, which existed as an organization from 1948 to 1988, would that not have Lou Thez and Buddy Rogers in your first 2 spots? I think Flair, there's a case. Who would the other one be?
I think Thez is a given. I think Flair is a given. Even Buddy Rogers, I don't know. I mean, he was champion for a couple of years. They were tumultuous years amongst the NWA promoters.
But he was the biggest box office attraction in the business in both of those years.
Would Jack Briscoe make a list like that? Dory Funk Jr. had a pretty good run with the title. If you had to pick 4 NWA champions to best represent the era of the NWA,
Between 48 and 88.
Between 48 and 88. I think Lou Thesz, without question. Ric Flair, I think just because of the longevity. It's 1988, but I mean, still, it's from 81 to 88. It's what do you put in between that? And I think the top candidates would probably be, well, you got to think of Harley, actually.
Yeah.
Harley.
And then also Harley was not only the NWA champion all those times and carried the belt all around the world, but also he was a part NWA territory owner. He was a booker. He was influential behind the scenes. I don't know that you put Terry before you put Briscoe or Dory, because Terry, even though his matches were more fun and generally more exciting, he was not as big a success as either his brother Dory or Briscoe as at the gate as champion, and didn't last as long.
Dusty Rhodes, I wouldn't personally put on an NWA Mount Rushmore. I think if you had a Florida wrestling Mount Rushmore, he's maybe the first guy you put up on there.
If you had a Crockett Mount Rushmore, he might very well be on there, because he ushered in that final huge era that was even bigger than the George Scott, Johnny Valentine, Wahoo era. Flair.
I don't know, though. If you had a Crockett Promotions Mount Rushmore.
See, now we're just changing all the rules, folks.
And by the way, with the NWA
wild card.
Okay, Charlie. With the NWA one, not a wrestler, but Sam Mushnick probably in some way should be up on there. But if we're looking at Crockett Promotions.
Well, but then in that case, then Benjamin Franklin isn't on Mount Rushmore, though.
That's true. Teddy Roosevelt snuck in. But
he knew the sculptor.
Crockett Promotions. You got to think once again Flair.
Yep.
Now we're going back away. I mean, it was a tag team territory. That's what makes it a little difficult. It wasn't always single stars.
Then do you go with the biggest box office attractions in the history of the Carolinas as your candidates?
Would Weaver and Becker be on a Crockett Promotions Mount Rushmore?
Very possibly.
If they counted as one slot, let's say.
Very possibly, because the thing is, when you have either Weaver and Becker, or you have Rip Hawk and Swede Hansen, or any of the tag teams in the George and Sandy Scott in the 50s and 60s, when they were running smaller buildings, but almost all the major towns were weekly. And then you have to think, okay, to this tag team or this top guy, he didn't draw these huge crowds like Flair did in or some of the guys did in the 70s, and especially in the 80s, where there were 20,000 people at the stadium or whatever, but they would draw 5,000 people in Greenville, South Carolina, every week for weeks on end on those hot programs, weeks and weeks. And you would end up, Greenville, South Carolina was a town that sold some years 150 or 200,000 or more wrestling tickets to live events. So those guys that were top guys, top teams for so long, repeated programs over years, may have drawn more people in the long run than the fucking guys in the 80s that were doing these sellouts in the big buildings, because it was a different time and a different way of doing business.
Now, Dusty Rhodes is 1984 to 1988 with sporadic guest appearances before then.
Yes.
I don't know if I would put Dusty on there before I'd put Wahoo or Steamboat.
Yeah, and Valentine.
Valentine, because of the
John,
impact.
Not Greg. Yeah. And then, like you said, Johnny Weaver, to the fans in the Carolinas in the 1960s and even early 70s, as ludicrous as it looks now with modern eyes, Johnny Weaver was the most popular young white meat babyface in the fucking wrestling business to those people. They didn't know anybody else. And Johnny could work. He was not a real handsome man, but he had that likability, and he was over with girls and grandmothers, and the guys liked him too. But very unlikely looking physique. Could work his ass off. Wasn't a great fucking interview.
Big ears.
But yeah, it like open doors of a taxi cab. But he stayed in that territory for by the time that he finished as a town promoter and Crockett sold out, he'd been there for 30 years. And every wrestling fan, and there were a lot of wrestling fans in the Carolinas in every big and small town, everybody knew who Johnny Weaver was because he had been on every major local television station for fucking 30 years. And then after retiring, he was an announcer. So it's hard to visualize now because everybody thinks, national people. You can see everything now. But nobody outside the Carolinas. Every once in a while, he'd go to Georgia. He might drop down to Florida just to get him out of the territory so he could come back in or whatever. But he never really moved. And he was there for so long. To people outside, the wrestling fans outside the Carolinas, they may have never seen him before. And maybe you'd see his picture in a magazine every now and then. But people in North and South Carolina and Virginia, he was one of the biggest stars in wrestling, and they couldn't understand. If Dory Funk Jr. came into the territory, one of the guys he defended the title against was Johnny Weaver, and people thought that Weaver might win it.
He was such a big star, they let him be a commentator in the 80s.
Yes, he was like, here, longtime wrestling legend Johnny Weaver here now to lend his color commentary. And he was running towns and being a local promoter and working in the office because he had so much experience. And I wish I knew what happened to his finish book. He kept a finish book where he wrote down finishes, not just like every night like I did with my date book. He would just write down the different finishes that they'd come up with. Just one after another, after another, after another. So if you went to him and said a tag team finish, well, let's see it. He'd flip his book. But he knew. And then after Crockett sold out, TBS wasn't going to pick him up. They didn't get it. And they weren't going to run the Carolina towns like they had before. Because not only every wrestling fan, but every high school football coach, every local volunteer fire department chief in the Carolinas knew Johnny Weaver. And they would trust him to bring a wrestling show to town, and they'd do the fundraisers. So since he knew everybody in the Carolinas, he got a job at the sheriff's department, and he would transport prisoners all over the state and all over the North and South Carolina. And they would recognize him, and they wouldn't fuck up because Johnny Weaver was in charge of them, right? They're like, shit, we don't want to have him put the sleeper on us. And he knew the shortest way to every backwater town in North and South Carolina. And that's what he did for the last, 10 or 15 years of his life, I guess.
Okay, well, back to the NWA Mount Rushmore.
Oh, fuck it. Fuck the Mount Rushmore.
No, who would you pick? You have to make 4 picks. Jim Cornette's 4 people for the NWA Mount Rushmore. All right,
in the NWA itself, I think, honestly, Luthez, yes. Ric Flair, yes. I think Buddy Rogers goes in because of the fact that he not only was the top box office attraction the 2 years he held the belt, but he was the instigation. He was so valuable. He was the instigation toward the Northeast actually splitting completely from the Alliance and doing their own thing, even though their timing was rotten and because of his fucking heart trouble, he never got to capitalize on it. After that.
Although, heart issues notwithstanding, Georgie and Macropolis heard Buddy conspiring to steal the territory from Vince Sr. Isn't that the story?
Well, yes, but he was probably going to steal the territory because he knew his heart was bad. He couldn't fucking work anymore.
Oh yeah,
that was his.
That way. Yeah.
That was his next scam, right? Because he's mid-40s, the biggest star in the business, has been or neck and neck with Thez and Rocca for fucking the previous 10 or 12 years. And he finds out he had to be the first one to know. There had to be some heart issue because you wouldn't just quit and not wrestle again. We've talked about this. So he probably figured he had maneuvered himself into position where even though the NWA had gotten their belt back, Vince Sr. was ready to go with him as the champion. And as we've discovered, just not say anything, let the people draw their own conclusions on whether it was the NWA title or not. And then, so now Vince has Bruno as a backup, but what was fucking Buddy's backup? Go quietly, like fucking we hope Trump will? or figure out a way to steal the fucking thing. So you got to think that, because everybody said Rogers was the ultimate worker. I bet you there's something that he probably started thinking of that plan about the day he left his doctor's office.
Okay, so that's 3. Fez, Flair, Rogers. Who's your 4th?
I almost think it has to be Harley, with all respect to Jack Briscoe. The most dominant other champion of that 40-year period.
I mean, it's easy to forget Briscoe only had a 2-year run with the.
No. It was 3.5.
Was it 3.5? Okay.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, mark it down in your little black books, wherever you keep it. I got Brian. Terry's was only 16 months or whatever. Or 13 or 14 months. Briscoe won. No, goddamn it was 2.5 because Briscoe won in 73.
He won in 73. I was right.
Yo, wait a minute.
Mark it down in your books, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah, shut up. Who would say a thing like that? Dory had it for 3.5. Briscoe had it for 2.5. From 73, July 73 to fucking December of 75.
If he had won it when he was originally supposed to win it, then you would have had a better.
We would have had 3 years. All right. Well, I will tell you what. If you've got ladies and gentlemen, if you have a podcast co-host that is a pain in your ass, I know how you can help heal that pain. That's with Omax Cryofreeze. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, whenever you feel that pounding sensation in your ass and you know your podcast co-host is around and really inflaming your anal orifice, you can take some of this Omax Cryofreeze and you can roll it right on from your buttocks down to your taint.
I'm using it right now.
Around the chocolate starfish and back up the front.
What?
And you can... Our friends at Omax know that we kid. No, in all seriousness, we've been talking about this stuff for so long now. Omax Cryofreeze, it's a CBD pain relief roll-on. If you have some type of pain that prevents you from relaxing or sleeping or exercising, old injuries from wrestling or anything else that you may have done stupid in your life, nagging muscle and joint pain, Omax Cryofreeze is what you need to use. It's specially formulated to block the pain receptors, reduce inflammation, improve muscle and joint flexibility. It's all natural. It works within 10 minutes. It doesn't stink like some of the other stuff does. It's good for you. I don't know whether I'd put it right on the chocolate starfish, but any place else on your body, if it hurts, you're good to go. And you can save money, as we all know, with the Jim Cornette experience or the Jim Cornette Drive Thru program here. We like to make sure that our listeners are taken care of, healthy, and save money. So you can go to omaxhealth.com, OMAX health.com, and enter the code DRIVE, DRIVE, omaxhealth.com, and enter the code DRIVE and get 20% off the Cryofreeze and everything else site-wide. And they've got the Sport Recovery Cream, and they've got just an incredible line of products. And you will feel better when you take these and use these and purchase these things. Anyway, you improve your physical training, your recovery, your performance, the whole 9 yards. It's the real deal. Invest in your health, for heaven's sake. omaxhealth.com, enter code DRIVE to get 20% off everything.
That's right. I'm using some right now because I have a podcast co-host who's a pain in the ass.
Hey!
I didn't say it was you.
Well, you do have a number of shows, so I'll let you off on this one.
It's you. No. Okay. Let's get another question.
Fucker. It's not me. It's you. Not you. It's me. I don't know what the fuck. All right.
I once knew a guy who broke up with his girlfriend because he met another girl. And his line was, I always remember this because it was so great. He goes, "It's not you. It's her." One of the great lines in history. But anyway, this next one was sent in to CornyDriveThru at gmail.com from Stephen Jefferson in Carlisle, UK. Listening to you talking and ranting about wrestling has made the last few months of lockdown a lot more entertaining. Thank you. Although I have to make sure my 4-year-old doesn't run in and learn some new words.
Uh-oh.
Anyway, my question...
Wait till he's at least 6.
Before Drew McIntyre finally reached a milestone at this year's WrestleMania, the closest we got to the first British wrestler to be WWE champion was the British Bulldog. I know there were about 3 periods when he was challenging for the title, most of which were when you were his manager. Do you know why Vince McMahon never put the belt on the Bulldog? Was it the wrong time? A certain clique influence? Or Vince didn't see him as a world champion? And had the Bulldog won the belt, what kind of champion do you think he could have been?
When he was closest to winning it in his various WWF runs would have been the 92-ish, 3-ish. I'm bad on WWF chronology when I wasn't there, but
for the record, 92, SummerSlam 92, he had the match with Brett at Wembley Stadium, which at that point in time was the biggest crowd in the history of the WWF, notwithstanding the fake number for WrestleMania 3.
Right.
But then he was gone by November.
Yeah.
So he was gone for a few years, and then he returned in either late 94. I guess it would have been late 94 he returned, yeah.
Well, the thing is, at that point, I believe the early 90s, and that match with Brett was so hot. And you know, if they'd have pulled the trigger there, they could have capitalized on it. I think he would have drawn, at least in short term, because he was obviously popular, and especially in England. But the problem was with Davey was always behind the scenes, because like you said, he was gone just a couple months later. And that's when he, I think he took a run with WCW, because he was the first, wasn't he the first one really to leave a WWF spot and go to WCW since Hurd had fucked Tully and Arn back in 89?
It's hard to say because of the way you just...
I mean, Jake showed up, but he didn't come right off WWF TV. He came right out of fucking wherever he'd been, not rehab, or it would have worked maybe.
Yeah, no one really came right off WWE TV, but the big ones would have been Jesse Ventura, Rick Rude, Jake, although that only lasted a few months and then he flamed out. And then Davey Boy showed up in early 93.
Yeah, you know, I think Davey, he had, by the time that I was managing him, when he came back and we had that run in 95, I loved Davey. He was a great guy. And when he was motivated and when he had somebody that he could work with, he could have a great match. If you put him in with Mabel, you know, or some of the WWF gimmicks or talent at that time, it could be brutal, because not only was he not motivated, but there was really not any way to have a fucking match with some of those guys. But when he got in the ring, like then that match with Nash that we've talked about so many times, when he challenged Nash for the title, and I got the biggest pop of the fucking match when I dropped an elbow on Nash's leg out on the floor. That match was so fucking rotten. I went to Vince afterwards and apologized for being a part of it. He's like, "What, pal?" I said, "No, I've never been involved in a world championship match that was that bad, and I just wanted to register that I apologize to you." But anyway, but what was he going to do with fucking Nash? Because Nash couldn't do any of Davey's shit, really. Nash couldn't hardly do anybody's shit. So, but at that same period of time, I've also told a story, and I love Davey, and I'm not knocking him. He was a nice guy. We never had a cross word. He was fun to be around. And once again, when he wanted to be, he was an excellent worker. And when he had somebody he could do shit with, he was an excellent worker. But me and Candido and Tammy, I think it was somewhere in Canada, I rode with them. They had a rental car, and I rode with them to the next town after a TV taping. And we were checking in the hotel, and there came Davey in. The sliding doors, power doors open, and Davey came in and walked up to the desk and was trying to ask the guy behind the clerk if he had a room, but he couldn't speak English. Nothing would. He was so mad. And I said, "Davey," I said, you need a room, don't you?" And he just kind of nods up and down. And I asked the guy, I said, do you have any rooms? And no, we're sold out. You guys had a reservation. I said, where has some rooms? And the guy said, oh, the Econo Lodge down the street or whatever, right? So I look at Davey. I said, Davey, see that? And he was in the car with somebody, and I didn't go out. He wasn't driving is all I knew. Somebody was driving. But I said, Davey, see the Econo Lodge. I'm pointing at it through the window. There, they've got room. And he walked out, and he had the shakes, the Soma shakes, because he didn't have all. It's a muscle relaxer, and his muscles were relaxed to the point where he couldn't keep track of them. And he got in a car and fucking went down the road. And the next day at TV, I saw him. He walked up to me. He said, Jim, why wouldn't you talk to me last night? I said, Davey, you weren't speaking any English. He said, oh. So he was a great talent, and he was part of the extended family there, et cetera, et cetera. But would you want him to be? They already had an issue with some of their champions of that era. I don't know that Vince could ever really trust him. And he never, after the initial Bulldogs tag team run in the 80s, the Bulldog Davey as a single, he'd have a run on top, something would happen, he'd leave. He'd have a run on top, something would happen, he'd leave. And it just 2 or 3 times, and there was never any time where he was there, solid, established, and they thought about putting the belt on him. Then it might have happened, it might not have, but it wasn't going to the way things were going.
A quick question. You bring up Somas, and you don't really hear about Somas anymore. You don't really even hear about painkiller abuse as much as you used to, but especially during that period of time in the 90s. Painkillers and Somas and Nubane and all these different drugs were being used by a lot of different people. And of course, it ended up costing several their lives. Was there ever any talk when you were on the creative team in WWE? Did anyone ever bring it up to Vince that some of these guys are having problems with pills?
Gingerly. And no, I mean, here's the thing. You didn't want to get heat on somebody with Vince unless for something they were doing, unless it was causing a problem. And truthfully and honestly, from my standpoint, the ones that were the biggest problem was the ones that he catered the most to. And I mean, it's not like I'm knocking these guys. Didn't Scott Hall either Scott Hall did an interview talking about a night he spent in a hotel with Shawn Michaels, or Shawn was doing an interview talking about the night he spent in a room with Scott Hall, where they were like, hey, bro, you still alive? Here's another couple of gimmicks. And so Vince, at the same time, I remember he was specifically hot at Louis Spicolli. Spicolli got the fucking spot there. Everybody liked Louis Spicolli. The first time I met him in Continental, he looked so much like Bobby Eaton. I said, one of these days, I'm going to have my own territory, and I'm going to book you to come in as Bobby Eaton's little brother so the heels can fucking cripple you and Bobby can get revenge, right? And then, of course, I had my own territory, but I didn't have Bobby, and then Spicolli got the spot up there as Rad Radford. Anyway, he had the issues with fucking pills and whatever, and he got canned for it because it was bad. But I remember one time, because Spicolli was friends with Candido, we were out in California. It may have been WrestleMania 96, and I'm in the car with Vince and JR and Bruce, and we're going to the building. And we passed Candido and Tammy, and Spicolli was, because he was from California anyway, and he was visiting them, so he was in the back seat. And Vince looks over, well, there's that drug-addicted bastard. You know, like, your fucking idiot champion. Well, he wasn't a champion. He was about to win the title that night, was the biggest pillhead in the fucking locker room, Shawn Michaels. And poor Spicolli, because he let it get out of hand and didn't have the fucking stroke, he got canned over it as a drug-addicted bastard. Or drug-addled or something, like, or drug-infested. It was some drug prefix. Drug-infested, I think it was. But you never knew whether Vince, how he would take something, if it was causing a problem, if the guy was hurting people or fucking getting in an issue or whatever the fuck. A lot of times Jim Ross would be the guy to go speak to him. if there was some problem. But you didn't just bring up that, well, guys are doing this if there was no problem, because then you might as well just say, hey, Vince, you need to get almost your whole roster out of here. If it was a problem, then they would talk to him on an individual basis. But then I just didn't get it, because the fucking guys that he was featuring on top were blatant and flaunting about what they were doing. And he wouldn't do anything about that. But if you were Louis Spicolli, he'd fire your ass.
There was never any talk about doctors that were overly friendly with the wrestlers, supplying them with stuff.
Oh, well, God, yeah, after that the guy in Indianapolis, then there was plenty of talk about that. Vince didn't want those people on the same, he didn't want them in the same dimension. If he could have cooked up some kind of fucking time machine and transported them to another dimension, he would have done it. The fucking doctors, he had that, what was his name, Hackett in Indianapolis?
I don't remember.
There was a doctor, it was like 96, 97, 98, where the late 90s in Indianapolis, I think he was involved with Pillman. I'm sure if we had Uncle Dave on now with his amazingly, recall memory, he could give you statistics. But yeah, they got rid of that guy when they found out about him, because he had learned from Zaharian. I'm not saying that Vince cared if guys did it, but he didn't want fucking lightning rod doctors involved with his fucking guys. If a guy was enterprising enough to find his own doctor and he wasn't a fucking mark and that it wasn't being spread around the locker room, you could probably got away with a lot back then, and I'm sure a bunch of people did. But once a doctor got hot, Vince wanted to send them to fucking Pluto.
All right, well, let's get a few more questions before our watch-along. This one was sent to CornyDriveThru@gmail.com from Casey in New Hampshire. In 1995, Mabel won the King of the Ring tournament, defeating Savio Vega in the final. Also in the tournament were The Undertaker and Shawn Michaels. My question is, why did Vince go with Mabel? Why not have Shawn Michaels beat The Undertaker in the final? Or have Shawn beat Mabel? That would have been 3 years of great wrestlers winning, the first two being Brett and Owen. This would have been a great push for Shawn towards winning the title in 96. I'd like to hear your thoughts on this. And we've gotten several other questions. Jim, King of the Ring 95, won by Mabel.
Oh, God. When was Watts in? When did Watts come in?
That was in September 95. August 95 he came in, I think.
Yeah, and that's why I was so happy for like 2 months, because this was before I was up there as a member of the office. I was just coming in as a talent from Smoky Mountain, right? But long about the summer of 95, things were really getting fucking just rotten. And I was the epitome of that was Vince found the biggest human being, largest human being that he could possibly find, and decided he's going to make him a fucking star. And I mean, and I always liked Mo, Sir Mo, Bobby Horn. He'd actually been in the business, and you know, he's from down south. He's from Tennessee, wherever the fuck, and he could work some. And Oscar, as we know, the manager, they found him. He jumped out at Vince in a hotel when they were at a pay-per-view and did a fucking impromptu rap. And somehow Vince said, oh, and now Vince knew a rapper. So when he needed a rapper, well, that guy raps. You know, that's how he got into business. I swear to God, I'm not kidding. And then Mabel, who was the biggest fucking human being in the world. And somehow Vince just sees the size and the face of the bleach blonde hair and the fucking ugly jaws, Richard Keel-like teeth, and the fucking, at first they were going to be baby faces because somebody had told him, Vince, 5 years after the fact, that, you know, rappers were baby faces and it was popular. But then Mabel becomes a monster, you know, later. It just, and you could tell even after that fucking horrible run, and how many people did he hurt that first time around, sitting on him and dropping on him, and that he couldn't control that fucking weight. Then they tried it later on. Then he came back in the Attitude Era, Viscera. I'm not knocking this guy as a person. I didn't have that much interaction with him, but good God, It's just a giant human being that his most athletic trait was being able to move that much weight around and not just be completely immobile, right? But otherwise than that, he hurt everybody and it just sucked. But that was the epitome of the year that Vince thought, well, I'll just do all that. And that was the fucking year. 95 was their rotten year where he lost $6 million or whatever and took the fucking water coolers off the 4th floor, cut everybody's salary.
But don't they always say about Vince, and they say the same thing about Watts? You look at Watts in 85, you look at Watts in 83, that when things aren't going exactly how they hope they would go, they always go back to big guys, no matter what.
Well, and there was some truth to that, but I'll say that's why I was happy when Watts came in, because I was looking at what I was looking at, and I knew at least, A, Watts is going to fucking figure me into whatever the fuck is going on, right? But secondly, there'll be some logic to this, and he will, at least if he's going to use big guys, at least it will be serious big guys. It won't be cartoon gimmicks and just giant, turds. And then that lasted for 2 months until Vince gave a basically overruled him on everything that he tried to do after telling him that he wanted Watts to come in and have final say. And Bill said, I'll go home. There's only room for one Titan in Titan Sports. So it was right after that SummerSlam. It sucked. As I remember, the whole card sucked. I can't even remember what I did if I was on it. And then Watts came in and we were happy for 2 months, and then he went home, and then holy shit, then I ended up there about 2 months later. Jumping shitballs.
All right. And that's your thoughts on King of the Ring, Mabel?
Yeah, that's about it. What else can you think? Does anybody remember a great Mabel match, a great Mabel promo, a great Mabel angle? Or do they just remember that he was fucking huge? He was part of a joke undercard tag team, and then he was turned into a heel and hurt a bunch of people. Teddy Long had a heck of a story about him. Teddy Long said he used to just fucking take Viagra in the locker room and sit there naked with a heart on for no reason.
Okay. I'm sure he bought those Viagra from Teddy Long.
He did.
Well, there we
That's
go.
how Teddy knew about it.
Well, the locker room sure has changed in 2020. Let's get another question here on the show. This was sent to CornyDriveThru@gmail.com from a guest on the 605 Superpodcast, Tom Hankins, Los Angeles, California. Hi, Jim and Brian. I'm not from Mississippi, but I hope that you'll answer my question anyway. By the way, there really is a Marksville, Mississippi. I'm wondering your thoughts.
By the way, to clarify that, we found out there is a Marksville, Mississippi, but it's so small it didn't make the index in the Rand McNally.
So how good is that atlas really?
Well, it doesn't cover every wide spot in the road. That would be almost impossible.
That's what we use Google Maps for. But anyway, back to Tom Hankins' question. I was wondering your thoughts on Mil Mascaras. Everybody seems to badmouth him, but I worked a program with him in Mexico in 1985. I found him to be the easiest opponent who I ever worked with. I didn't do the lucha flippy spots, which I've always disliked, but I'd catch him when he did them. So here's someone with a positive experience dealing with Mil Mascaras. Jim, everyone badmouths him. What are your thoughts on Mil Mascaras?
Well, I can speak purely from having met him the once at the Clash of Champions in Corpus Christi, and briefly. And, just so I can judge him just impartially as a fan and as a historian, all those stories are correct. If Mil Mascaras, especially in the 80s and 90s, and I was about to say the later years of his career, isn't he still working? Did he work like fucking 6 months ago in Japan?
It was almost maybe a year ago. I don't know if he's worked this year with the virus going around, but he was still having the occasional match. He had one in Japan. I saw him do a very sad flying cross body off the top rope, but wasn't it like a 6-man tag and the other two guys held his hands? He climbed up to the top and then he let go and kind of fell in a diving manner off to the guy. Yeah, but he's 80. And so all these stories are true, especially as he started getting older. The last thing that would ever happen is that you would get hurt in a Mil Mascaras match because he wouldn't do anything dangerous to himself that might incidentally hurt you.
he would not give an offensive maneuver that would require him getting very far up in the air, except to do his trademark, the flying burrito, as Manny Fernandez called it, the flying cross chop, and then the crossbody off the top. And as long as you caught him, you were okay. As long as he was going over, it was going to be an easy match if you didn't try to make him do anything he didn't want to do. I saw, where was it? It was a Japanese tape, I think from the 90s, and somebody tried to pick him up for a body slam. And you've never seen the law of gravity be repealed so quickly. In that he just fucking sandbagged this motherfucker, and he just gave him kind of like a little over-the-knee backbreaker. Even that was, a trial and a tribulation. So it was going to be an easy match. It was an easy match for Cactus Jack at the Clash of Champions if he had chose to have a by-the-numbers, lackluster match for Mil Mascaras to make a personal appearance in tights and nobody gets hurt. But that's not only not what Cactus Jack wanted to do, but not what we wanted out of it when we booked that match. I've told that story. We figured we'll get Cactus Jack over one way or the other, even if this old fart's beating him. So yeah, if you weren't a top guy, or even if you were a top guy and you just wanted to have a blasé match, put all of Mascaras' shit over, work his match, he'll do pretty much none of yours whatsoever, and he has to win, then is a night off. But if you were trying to get over in a territory and you didn't want to, just fucking look like shit, or you cared about, we want to go out and tear the house down because it's national TV, or some ulterior motive for you to have some professional pride, you hated to work with Mil Mascaras because it didn't matter what you wanted to do. That's all those things that he wanted was going to happen. So all the stories are true. He would never do a job. He wouldn't do anybody else's shit. He always had to go over. He always had to look good. And as he got older, when he was young, it was fucking impressive. That's how he got over. Remember, everybody was always young and got over. You people of the video era just see these people after they're already old. It wasn't like he was, ever very giving or caring, because he was pushed from the start as a top guy, but he could do shit. He could fly around. He could do those fucking cross bodies. His body looked like $1 million. That fucking chest spread, right, alone. And at the same time as he would suck in his gut, and he had the abs when he was young and that big wide chest, and he'd wiggle his fingers and walk around the ring on tippy toes like his fucking corn cob was stuck up his ass. He got ridden, browbeaten most time behind his back by the other boys for doing that, because he was always a prima donna. But he was also the Hulk Hogan of Mexico. He was the fucking guy, so he could get away with it. So all the stories are true. Shitty match, do nothing for you, night off. Nobody gets hurt.
And a major star everywhere. Major star in Mexico, Japan, Houston, Los Angeles, New York. Eddie Einhorn runs opposition to the WWF with the IWA. He's their champion. We talked about Bruno being on the covers of magazines. In the 1970s, Mil Mascaras was on the cover of as many magazines as anyone.
Well, and that's because Bill Apter has admitted that Mascaras was his favorite wrestler. He loved the gimmick. That's why I always put him on the cover. But they sold also because he was it was just so visual with the capes and the mask and the ridiculous amount of money that he made over the years in Mexico. Also, a lot of it went toward keeping up his image. He was the man of 1,000 masks, and he did have the capes and the jackets and all the gold and the sparkly and the sequins, or he'd wear one of his million masks with the fucking, suit where he looked like $1 million and a movie star, which he, was then later on, and did the Mexican movies like Santo and etc. So he was another guy. He was a big deal from the time he first got into business, like Bruno, just in his country, and that was the perfect place for him. Take the same guy with the same look, even the same gimmick, but put it in the United States instead of Mexico, and we wouldn't be talking about him right now. It had to be the right guy in the right place, and definitely at the right time.
Okay, Jim, a couple more questions, and then our watch along. This was sent to CornyDriveThru@gmail.com from Cliff. What are your thoughts on Ron Simmons?
Damn. Just anything in general, or there's no specific question? I love Ron Simmons as a person, and I thought he was a great fucking talent. We first met him when he came up from Florida. He'd been a rookie there in 85 or 86. He comes up, they buy Florida in 87. That's where we first met him. Great guy. Fucking built like a fucking monster. Could really go. Could maybe he reminded me a lot of JYD and when he was young, and that he was in good shape and could move despite being, that big. Had a heck of, when he was partners with Butch Reed. Remember Hacksaw Bruce Reed in Florida had a run in 81 as a top babyface, similar to what Simmons had done in fucking 86.
I think it was 82.
Was it? All right. Nevertheless.
Because Dory was booking.
Mr. Calendar. But anyway, then Butch becomes a heel in Mid-South, and Ron's a babyface in Florida, but then he comes up and then he later on becomes a heel as a member of Doom with Butch. It did a great job with when Watts put the belt on him, the program with Vader and the famous match in Baltimore. Really, by the time that Ron got experience and really got to the maximum, the best of his in-ring performance, he was in the WWF, and they originally wanted to push him as a single, as that the Black Gladiator from, I don't know, fucking Harlem, Greece or something. Farouk Assad. And I was on the creative team trying to get some fucking understanding from Vince. Vince McMahon had creative services, the Chili McFreeze folks, draw these costumes of this outfit for Farouk Assad. And I've listened to Vince try to tell me what the fuck. And of course, Bruce understood it. But I didn't know whether we were going for fucking a disciple of Malcolm X or goddamn Spartacus. And it obviously the first part didn't work. And then Ron started, at least because everybody respected Ron as a man, an athlete, and, great football player, Florida State, blah, blah, blah. Ron started getting to throw some stuff in, and Jim Ross is always a big fan of his, so he'd kind of give Ron's stuff credibility, and they toned it down to where they dropped the Assad, and it became more Nation of Domination, fucking African heritage rather than, I didn't know they had gladiators in darkest Africa. I don't know what the fuck the first thing. It's another example of Vince getting these ideas. But back to Ron.
That helmet. They had him wearing
the helmet. I know. I don't know. But anyway, then finally Ron settled in, and with Bradshaw, those guys are good friends. They like traveling together. They like teaming together. And, I enjoyed that tag team. They worked some for me in OVW down here when they had been off the main roster and they were coming back. They sent them down to help some of the younger guys. They were always a pleasure to have. Every time I see Ron to this day is a damn. He's fun and he's fucking hilarious. And at the Hall of Fame deal in 2017, I was sitting with him and Bradshaw. They were telling stories when Teddy Long was their manager. They got in the wrestling business early enough to be able to experience the territories. Bradshaw just at the end of it, Simmons more. And they were from the wrestling business, so they were still easy to talk to, and they just spoke the same language. Like they get in the locker room, they didn't look at their fucking phones or text people or start walking through their match step by step. They were telling stories about what they used to do on the fucking road before and after the matches. One night, Teddy Long's fucking in the back seat drinking beer. And they're in a snowstorm outside of Boston. And fucking Bradshaw's driving. No, Bradshaw's in the front seat. And Ron's driving. And they got to piss. And they pull over in this fucking blinding snow. And they said, Teddy, you got to piss? No, I'm okay. So they get out, and Ron gets out and pisses on one side, and Bradshaw gets out and pisses on the other side. Well, as Ron's walking around, and it's 2:00 in the morning, and there's snow, Ron walks back around to get in the car. Teddy decides, well, I have been drinking beer. I'm going to piss anyway. He gets out, and Bradshaw sees him get out. As Bradshaw gets back in, they slam the door at the same time. Ron ain't looking. He sees Bradshaw's got back in. He fucking starts the car up and fucking takes off. Bradshaw looks back at Teddy standing there in the goddamn snow with his dick out. And he looks at Ron like Ron's going to put it over and say something like, yeah, we're fucking with him. Ron don't say a goddamn word. Bradshaw then says, well, Ron, that's kind of fucking harsh. What do you mean? Leaving Teddy back there like that. Well, I didn't leave Teddy, man. He looks in the back seat, sees Teddy's gone. Well, goddamn. Now they've got to get off the next exit. Unlike the Massachusetts Turnpike, it's 5 more miles, and they got to flip and they go back down. By the time they go back down, and they got to overshoot because it's on the other side, right? They got to go around and get back to where they were. Teddy Long's a fucking snowman standing on the side of the fucking road with a beer bottle in his hand. He had put his dick away. But anyway, I like Ron Simmons very much. Great fucking guy and heck of a fucking talent.
A couple questions on that. Did he always do damn? Like back in WCW, was he saying damn?
Well, see, that's the thing. He would, every once in a while, he just had that James Earl Jones voice. And if he saw something preposterous, he just said, damn. And that's why they fucking put it in, and it became his thing because he delivered it so well. It just sounds it sounds funny without him having to be silly. Although they put some silly things in front of him as the years went by, but when he was actively wrestling, he was not silly.
It took them a little while to figure out what to do with him in the NWA/WCW. Do you think he would have fit in with the Varsity Club?
No, I don't think so. Because, besides the fact that the whole Varsity Club thing was that they were amateur wrestlers and Ron was a football player. Yes, obviously college sports, but Rotunda and Steiner and Kevin, they had the each individual thing where they could play off each other, and each one of them, it could kind of be like a Three Stooges thing where each one of them was a little off. But together it worked, and it didn't seem like they were doing it on purpose. They were just goofy. Ron wasn't ever off. Ron wasn't strange. Ron was a kick-ass heel or a fucking kick-ass babyface, a tough guy or whatever, but he wasn't. Maybe if you'd have done something where all the other fucking lunatics in the asylum were bouncing around him and he was the normal one, I don't know, but I don't see the connection that they would have had there.
So I take it you weren't a fan of Steve Dr. Death Williams or much later Dan Spivey being in the Varsity Club?
Well, Doc I was, because Doc, it could work as, once again, amateur wrestler, right? And I knew Doc and Rick Steiner were legitimately friends, and they'd worked Mid-South together. They kind of fit. Spivey, they didn't, no. Sullivan could work well with Spivey because Spivey was, the fucking big giant. Sullivan, he liked. They didn't like. He just worked better with the freak shows and the more strange talent. They bounced well off of him, but Spivey didn't fit any fucking where, in my opinion.
And then finally on Ron Simmons, Doom, a team I'm a big fan of, and sadly they only had a couple-year run as a tag team. But how good were Doom, and do you think they're underappreciated?
Yes, and was it even that long?
They got together in 89. They broke up in 91. So, yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, you're right then. Yeah. The only thing at first, and see, Flair was always high on Ron Simmons also. Flair liked legitimate athletes. Flair, he's a hell of a fucking man, right? That type of thing. And the reason why he wanted to put him with Butch was because they actually were somewhat similar in that they both played football. They both broke in or had a first push in Florida. They were kind of around the same size, but Butch had more experience than Ron. So the idea was that in the team of Doom, Butch would be the veteran and he'd kind of bring Ron along because Ron had not healed it a lot at that point. I didn't get the masks. I know they wanted the name Doom, well, let's do the team name Doom, but I never got the mask because it was so hard to cover those guys up.
Who came up with the name? Who came up with Doom?
That was during Flair's watch, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think it was all pretty much him. As I remember he's a big fan of the team, and he wanted woman Nancy to manage them because for the obvious reason, what a fucking visual. Holy shit. And she's the one in charge, right? But I didn't get the mask because any wrestling fan who kind of knew anything knew who they were, because how can you there wasn't that many people that looked like that physically, and especially both of them in the same place at the same time. If you could have maybe said if there'd been one, that might be Butcher Eater, it might be Ron Simmons, but there's two of them standing there. Who the fuck else could it be? So when they took the masks off, I liked it better. But I thought Doom just you've already got guys that have names in the wrestling business use those. But otherwise than that, but it was good because once they established the team name Doom and they took the masks off and they still had Doom, then, at least we knew who they were and it was still a team.
It's funny, on John Arezzi's Pro Wrestling Spotlight Then and Now, where we review the old shows, we're now in April of 1990. And relatively speaking, Woman managed Doom for a short period of time, and then she went to the Horsemen and Doom went with Teddy Long. And even a shorter period of time, Woman had a bodyguard named Nitron.
Oh, God.
And all these months later, in the spring of 1990, John's still getting phone calls saying, "Where's Nitron?" Or guessing that Nitron's going to join the Skyscrapers, or Nitron's going to be Sting's bodyguard. For some reason, among certain fans, there was a fascination with Nitron. I never knew about this until reviewing these old shows.
I remember that real quick just because it was very quick. And I can't remember who had alerted Flair that this guy existed, but he was 7 foot fucking 2 or 3 or something. He's just huge and had some kind of Vanilla Ice weird haircut, I remember. And so maybe a leather jacket, and the guy that big or whatever. Oh, we can do something with this guy. And apparently they found out real quick he just didn't have the first clue about how to get home at night. and it didn't last long, and he was gone. But yes. And then that's when they made Teddy a man. And that's when, as we will discuss here in a second with our watch along, that was during the period where they were going to switch Nancy to go with the Horsemen. They made Teddy Long, who'd been a referee, managers, and put him with Doom. And I was going to be a manager, and the Midnight was going to join the Horsemen with Woman. And then we've talked on the deep dives, Herd botched all that up, and that's how we enter the summer of 90. That might be an interesting segue to our watch along now. We're right there anyway. We're right there. We might as well stop and pick it up.
Well, remember, though, Teddy Long had been managing the team of the 90s, the Skyscrapers, when Sid got hurt, and then Spivey got hurt, and then Spivey decided not to show up, and Mike Enos ended up being a masked member of the Skyscrapers.
That's right. I forgot they had a masked Skyscraper.
Yeah, with Mean Markel. Hey, real quick, on this topic, before we go to the watch-along, whose idea was the masked Minnesota Wrecking Crew 2, which were the Destruction Crew, the AWA Tag Team Champions, Mike Enos and Wayne Bloom, managed by Ole Anderson?
What date did they debut? Oh, great Brian Last.
It would either be February or March of 1990, because it was when Arn got hurt. And Arn was out for a little bit at the beginning of 1990.
You know what? It may have been Flair's, or it may have been the committee that followed when Flair quit. I remember us doing it. The theory was that it was more important because, as we will recall, just a few months earlier, we had thought we were going to have Tully Blanchard and Arn Anderson to go along with Ric Flair and Barry Windham, right? Then all of a sudden we got Arn, but we didn't get Tully. So now we're short a Horseman.
And you didn't have Barry until May.
No, wait a minute. We had Barry in December of 89.
No. In December
was that
of 89,
December of 88? Oh, okay, that's right. It was December of 88. Then he left. Then he came back.
December of 89, Barry disappeared from the WWF because of the scandal with Kendall and Blackjack.
The point is, we thought we were going to have 3 of the 4 Horsemen, and there was discussion with Barry who was going to be the other one, and all of a sudden then we only had 2 Horsemen, and we weren't getting Barry. And then Arn got hurt. So now what the fuck? So the decision was made that it was more important to have two people that we could somehow tie to the Four Horsemen / Minnesota Wrecking Crew of the Andersons, rather than that we had just stolen the tag team champions from the AWA, because at that point, that was like being the nicest guy in prison. Nobody gave a fuck anymore. But so they put more guys under masks. and then Ole made them the construction workers. Everybody had to have a blue collar job when Ole was booking. Remember, he took Norman the lunatic and made him a truck driver.
That's right.
He took goddamn Enos and Bloom and made them the destruction crew with the hard hats and the sledgehammers. It was fucking brutal.
Well, no, that you got to give credit to Vern, because that was in the AWA.
I thought that Ole did that. Well, what other working man gimmicks?
See, that's what was so weird about it. They were the AWA Tag Team Champions, and they were pretty good. I mean, they were one of the highlights of the last year of the AWA. They were managed by Johnny Valiant at first, and then they were without Johnny Valiant. And all of a sudden, they're under masks. Mike Enos first as one of the masked skyscrapers at Wrestle War, and then they're in there as the masked Minnesota Wrecking Crew. But they were really good as the Destruction Crew. It's almost like you should have brought them in as that. I guess maybe because they were the AWA Tag Team Champions, they didn't want to bring them in and have them lose while they were the champions in a dying promotion. But
no, they would have come in and fucking done a job for Tinkerbell, because the AWA was dying and they were making no fucking money, and they got the chance to come in to WCW and get a better payoff for a TV taping than anything else they were doing, with Vern. So the WCW office didn't think that it was important enough to have the AWA Tag Team Champions to even bother worrying about it. They just, would just make them the fucking stretching crew or wrecking crew or whatever the fuck. And that's when Ole was starting that. At least these guys were pretty good, but then Ole, by the end of 90, remember, had started the campaign to let's just go ahead and find 15 more Road Warriors, just unknown muscle builders and bodybuilders.
That's where Kevin Nash showed up. Yeah.
Kevin Nash. That's, and the original Master Blaster fucking that disappeared after that horrible match in the Kobo. No, the guy was so fucking rotten. He tried to work with Horner and Armstrong.
He missed every move he did.
At the Kobo, missed every move he did. They said that night he checked out of his hotel, went to the bus station. Nobody ever saw him in wrestling ever again. And he was on national television. He was just anybody they didn't have to pay, because what Ole was doing was the opposite of the approach that Flair had taken. When Flair got the book, Flair said, I'm going to bring in the best talent I can get. We're going to juice this thing back up. We're going to shoot these hot angles. We're going to get business going. We're going to get the ratings up and the pay-per-view. We're going to get the houses up. And that lasted about 6 months until Herd drove him crazy and he fucking quit. And quit as booker. And he had got the ratings up and had got the pay-per-views up. The houses, as we mentioned, were still kind of the shits. Ole took the opposite approach that summer. He said, well, fuck, none of this fucking shit's going to draw anyway. And he didn't really give a fuck, because he knew that Herd was going to fuck with his booking. If he fucked with Flair's, why wasn't he going to fuck with his? So what Ole was doing was the things he could do. Let's just fucking run off all the goddamn expensive guys and hire a bunch of guys we pay nothing to. It ain't going to draw anyway, but who gives a shit? And we might discover somebody. And he wasn't going to argue with Jim Herd on the things that Herd really wanted done, so that way Herd would leave him alone to do other shit that he might have wanted to do that he thought would work. And that's where Ole was. He was basically all about reducing expenses and just slowing it down and at least getting some credibility back. Because Ole felt like everybody else did, that we were copying WWF and being too cartoony, and the WCW or the Turner Broadcasting influences with the fucking Penthouse Pets and the fucking pseudo celebrities and the fucking RoboCops or whatever. So Ole just wanted to do a basic wrestling program that wouldn't lose a lot of fucking money. And that worked for him for a while until he ran everybody off and all the green guys couldn't draw anything and they were doing worse.
Well, while Ole was bringing in these makeshift tag teams, 1990 did have its share of great tag teams still in WCW.
Okay, so what we are going to watch along today is the Southern Boys versus the Midnight Express match from the Great American Bash 1990 from beautiful downtown Baltimore. That is on the WWE Network for those of you so inclined, so you can sync it up and watch it along. But for context in this thing, we've done some deep dives on everything the Midnight Express was doing. We had been baby faces since the original Midnight thing from the end of 88 through the end of 89, when in November we turned back heel finally. That was the whole idea when we came back in June of 89 to WCW, was the idea to establish us as a top team again as baby faces, because that's how we left, and then find someone and some issue to turn, because we needed long-term to be heels. Everyone was in agreement with this, except Jim Herd then became the stumbling block because he didn't want us to work with any top teams, because he didn't like the Midnight Express, and boy, he didn't like me. So when we turned finally on the Dynamic Dudes because they sucked and he hated them too, and they were the only team he'd let us work with, we ended up kind of switching babyface, as you were, because we were also in Troy, New York. So the height of the Northeastern smart fan emerging scene in the late 80s. The Midnight Express, former World Tag Team Champions, decorated tag team, etc., turns heel and gets a giant, enormous babyface pop because the people hated the babyfaces. So we worked a program with them for a couple of months. Then the Rock and Roll Express, Ricky and Robert, came back. And Flair, as booker, specifically booked the Midnight and Rock and Roll on Wrestle War that year, the pay-per-view, because it was in Greensboro. And our job was to go out and do what the Midnight and Rock and Roll did, which we did. But at that point, that's when Flair quit as booker because Herd wouldn't leave him alone. So we couldn't get a fucking run with them again. I was still on the booking team. The committee, as they say. That's when I pitched the thing because Flair had wanted to get Pillman over as a single, or just Pillman over as a star. So Brian Pillman and Z-Man were a babyface tag team. And we shot an angle right after Flair had quit, right after Wrestle War, with Pillman and Zinc, injured Pillman's throat. We've done a deep dive on this, where after the program was over with, the Pillman was going to come out on top of the Midnight Express and get revenge for us injuring his throat that had been ravaged by childhood cancer. And then Herd and Barnett got together and cut that angle off and didn't air all the things about his injured throat and etc. So the angle with Pillman and Zinc, where we were supposed to get heat on them at the start, win the U.S. tag belts, and then lose in the end, ended up in reverse, because by the time that we got to the pay-per-view at Capital Combat for the U.S. tag title match with Pillman and Zinc, the committee which replaced Flair had been replaced by Ole as the sole booker, and for some reason he put us over and we beat the babyfaces in the blow-off match and won the U.S. tag title back. Then, I think because they wanted to possibly make Pillman a single on his own to get rid of Zinc at that time. I don't know. Then for the next 2 months, we were the U.S. Tag Team Champions and we were never featured on television. Bobby and Stan were almost never on TV. If we were, maybe we got a win over some job guys every once in a while. Most of the time, we'd be putting over other teams in one of the main event TBS matches. I was doing very little except for interview segments because Ole didn't like heel color commentators, so he took all of them off, which, by the way, the heel color commentator is what Jim Herd had wanted me to give up managing the Midnight Express for 3 months before that. So if I'd have done that and give up managing, I would have then been off television entirely. It was fucking chaos, right? And in the middle of that was where the Midnight were supposed to be members of the Horsemen, but Herd in Barnett ixnayed that, and that's why I quit as a member of the booking committee. So we come to July 7th, 1990. We're the U.S. Tag Team Champions, but we haven't won a match on TV in 2 months, or even been on television in 2 months. And we are being challenged by the Southern Boys, who have just started on this particular run. They're brand new. And they're the Southern Boys in Baltimore. I know a lot of people say Baltimore is a Southern city, but not where wrestling crowds were concerned, especially in the late 80s and early 90s. They were like Philly and New York. It was the smart fans that were starting to cheer for the heels. So the Midnight Express, beloved team of the smart set, is in Baltimore on pay-per-view, facing a brand new team of guys they don't know who are coming in with a Southern Boy gimmick. And to top it all off, the smart fans were exceptionally kind to us at the time because they knew that we were being jobbed out and mistreated. So even if we set fire to fucking Bambi's mother, we couldn't get any heat because they cheered every time we won a match because we did it so seldom. So this psychology's all fucked up. Would you not agree, Brian? This whole fucking, whole way we got here is all fucked up.
No, WCW 1990 is chaotic.
Yeah. So anyway, we assume we're not dropping the belts because back then they still gave you notice if you were a champion and when you'd be dropping the belt. They wouldn't do that to us till August in the Meadowlands when we dropped them to the Steiners. They told us when we came in an hour before the show, and we were insulted because we didn't mind doing a job for the Steiners, but we had not been given proper notice like you did to a champion that you respected that they were going to be switching the belts. Just another thing. But anyway, so we knew we weren't going to be switching the belts probably, but we didn't know whether we were going to do a DQ or whatever. They didn't tell you the exact finishes back in those days until you got to the show. So when we get there that day, I obviously had a number of ideas because I knew we had to have a good match with the Southern Boys to get them kicked off and hopefully to give us somebody to work with. Because we needed somebody that we wanted to be able to have good matches with, to work a program with. And maybe if, we've had a few matches with these guys, but maybe this will continue if it's good. And this would be a good time now, Brian, if you want to read down the entire card that Ole Anderson booked for the Great American Bash 1990, which we fondly remember for a couple of the matches, but we will quickly recall that we've forgotten several of the others.
Once again, July 7th, 1990, Baltimore, Maryland. Brian Pillman defeated Buddy Landell. Mike Rotunda, the ship captain Mike Rotunda, not the varsity club captain Mike Rotunda, defeated the Iron Sheik. Whew. Doug Furness defeated Dutch Mantell. Here's the one you and I both talked about before that we've forgotten about. Harley Race defeated Tommy Rich.
In 1990.
A big rematch from 1981. Of course, Midnight Express and Southern Boys. We'll talk about that in a moment. Big Van Vader defeated Tom Zink.
Yeah, and meanwhile, Brian Pillman as a single beat Buddy Landell, and Vader just demolished Tom Zink about six weeks after we beat them for the U.S. tag title, so that may show you something there.
The Steiner brothers defeated the Fabulous Freebirds of Jimmy Garvin and Michael Hayes.
Yep, and I so badly wanted to have a good television and pay-per-view program that year with the Steiner brothers because we could fucking have such great matches with them and get heat on them and knew how to work with them, and everybody enjoyed everything, and they were stuck with Garvin and Hayes, and Garvin and Hayes didn't like taking those fucking suplexes. Steiners didn't particularly like giving them to them because they took them like sacks of potatoes. And it was just a style clash, and Jimmy Garvin couldn't stand up to the fucking Steiner brothers physically. And but that's what we were stuck with all summer because Michael was, insinuating himself into the booking periphery at that point.
The Dudes with Attitude, comprising El Gigante, Junkyard Dog, and Paul Orndorff, defeated the Horseman team of Arn Anderson, Barry Windham, and Sid Vicious via disqualification.
If you'd have had a handicap match with Paul Orndorff against Arn Anderson and fucking Barry Windham, that would have been great. But God almighty dog. JYD was as bad as he was going to get at that point. Poor El Gigante was clueless, and then there was Sid.
Lex Luger, the United States champion, defeated Mark Callis with Paulie Dangerously.
That is interesting. Lex Luger versus The Undertaker before he was The Undertaker is an interesting footnote, but I don't think anybody is going to put that match on the Mount Rushmore.
The World Tag Team Champions Doom with Teddy Long defeated the Rock and Roll Express.
And that was, as I recall, pretty good fucking match because obviously Reggie Robert can sell their ass off, and fucking Doom was on the march at that point. So I once again would have loved to have had a program with fucking Rock and Roll, but Doom was, as we've talked about, a fine team at that point.
And then the main event, a match that's been built up for so long and had an injury that delayed it. Sting defeated Ric Flair to become the NWA World Heavyweight Champion.
And that's another one of their fucking rip snorters, but it was delayed. It would have been so much better at Wrestle War. But when you think about it, Wrestle War was in February, March, April, May, June. Sting came back from a fucking torn ACL in 4 months, which is pretty freaky. And still wasn't 100%, but he got by with it.
And that was your card, July 7th, 1990.
So we can see also that besides the Rock and Roll and Doom and Freebirds and Steiners, because the Steiners were over, and obviously Flair and Sting because that was the main event, it was up to us to steal this fucking show out from under, as we usually try to do, anybody but Ric Flair. So, but we were laboring under handicaps. So we thought, okay, we love Tracy Smothers and Steve Armstrong. We're going to do the best we can. I had some ideas going in. We get to the building. And at that point, for a couple years, first Dusty had been letting me do the finishes for the midnight most of the time on the big shows. I'm not talking about who wins or loses. I'm talking about laying it out afterwards. Or, here, you guys are going over, and I needed to be with such and such. Put it together for me, that type of thing. So then that started with really the Fantastics program. And then later on, the thing with the original Midnight was mine, most of that stuff. Then shortly after that, I was involved in the booking committee. So I was doing a lot of finishes, but especially ours. But I didn't have anything concrete, but I wanted to see what Ole wanted us to do. Well, we were already got enough handicaps. So this is when Ole was going to calm things down, get some more credibility back. And also, he didn't want to, I know in hindsight now, he didn't want us to steal too much of the fucking show because Herd would be mad. So he gives us a finish. He said, the heel's got to be able to beat somebody once in a while without you interfering. Don't use the racket. Don't interfere in the finish. Okay. We don't have to do that, but it's kind of our trademark. And also you're taking away one of the big pops when I take a bump in the finish, when the babyface finally gets a hold of me, right? He said, no, we need to show the heels can beat somebody. Oh, you mean the heels that we're not going to you haven't booked on TV in the past 2 months? Those heels. It could beat plenty of people if you just told them to. So don't interfere in the finish. Don't use the racket. Don't throw the racket in. And here's what Ole came up with. Hey, Stan, you do that karate stuff. Well, fuck the baby face. You're illegal. Throw one of those kicks to the back of his fucking head. Fuck him from outside. That was literally the direction that we got for this fucking match from Ole. So he don't want me to interfere. Don't use the racket. We're going to fuck the baby faces with a karate kick from the illegal guy to the back of the head. Now you guys go put it together. All right, fuck. Well, then I said, all right. We all just sat down, and the Southern boys were happy to be there at that point. And Steve and Tracy, they were great, but neither one of them were real experienced. And they weren't going to fucking, start reinventing the wheel. They're just happy to be there. So we figured out Steve, his main trait was his athleticism. He could do the high cross body, the high clothesline, the big drop kicks. Tracy was a better overall worker, and he had a better memory. If you needed something to be memorized real good or just remembered, probably Tracy instead of Steve. And also because Stan and Steve Kern had in Tennessee in 85 had broken Tracy in, Stan knew Tracy and knew that Tracy had taken some karate. And, of course, Stan had done the same thing. Stan used some karate kicks back then, and I'm not saying that either one of these guys was goddamn Bruce Lee or fucking Chuck Norris, okay? There was no MMA back then. Every guy in the fucking 70s took karate. Stan not only took karate when he worked at a gym, but he ended up doing some training, I think, some teaching. But there were a lot of fucking guys in the 70s after the martial arts movies came out that actually went to these karate schools and had black belts, and they'd be accountants at fucking Merrill Lynch in the daytime, but they had a black belt in Taekwondo or whatever. Stan had trained and was pretty good. Tracy had trained enough to get by on a local level. But we had done in previous matches a little fucking karate zabada with them, and the people liked it. And then we put together a few spots that the baby faces could do to show their athleticism. We knew we had to shine them up and get them over. Then we got a heat spot. And then you didn't call heat. You called heat as it happened. You didn't predetermine heat. It just happened. So we had a few baby face spots. We had a big heat spot. And then we needed the finish to be exciting. And a kick in the back of the head from the illegal guy was not necessarily exciting. So we said, what if, since we weren't really even sure who was going to win this thing, because we're getting beat all the fucking time, and these smart fans know we're getting beat all the time, why don't we make it look like by throwing in 4 or 5 false finishes, we take them on a fucking roller coaster ride, we create doubt in the people's mind as who's going to win, then we convince them that the baby faces are going to win, and then we fuck them in the nick of time. That's what we had to do, so we came up with some false finishes that we thought the people would buy. And back then, once again, this is fucking 30 years ago, there weren't 18 false finishes in the end of every fucking match. You got heat on the baby faces. Baby face got a hot tag, made a big comeback. You did 2 or 3 false finishes. You went fucking home before you wore out your welcome, like every match does these days. But we decided we were going to take them on some twists and turns, so when that finally did happen and we fucked them and we pulled the fucking rug out from under them, the people that had a roller coaster ride, so maybe they'd be like, wow, and the baby faces would have appreciated their value in the fans' eyes in Baltimore, and it looked like we did something also. So, and you will notice when we watch this, that unfortunately also I forgot about Mike Atkins, referee. He was Nick Patrick's understudy. And he's a nice guy, but he got lost as fuck on one of these false finishes and was distracted when he should have been counting, and then tried to go count when he should have been distracted. We will talk about that as it happens. But otherwise, the story going through this, when you watch it and you listen to our commentary, you're obviously not listening to the audio of the show. JR did a wonderful job, but more importantly was the sound of the crowd, because you will hear that it's about as tepid as you got for a pay-per-view back in those days for the Southern Boys entrance and for the first little part of the match, because they didn't know what to think about it. But the reason why we considered it a success was by the time that we started the heat, the fans had finally gotten behind the Southern Boys, and they got with them further through the heat. And by the time that we go to the false finishes at the end, they're popping and realizing that anybody can win at any given point. And even though we still got cheered when we did win, there was appreciation for the match in the building. So we kind of did the job we were supposed to do. And I think everybody agreed that, with the exception of Flair and Sting, this was the best match on the show. It was one of those ones that, who called it the best American tag team match of the year? One of our old friends with a newsletter somewhere. But anyway, so there you have it. That's kind of the setup on where we were in context of the match as it came about, what we were given, and now you can see and judge for yourself on what we did with it. And we'll go through it and pick out some little things.
Well, once again, Jim, I think we should remind everyone, if you're watching on the WWE Network, because obviously there are other sources as well, but on the WWE Network, you want to go to 45 minutes and 20 seconds into the 1990 Great American Bash, there's the option to jump to a specific scene. You want to clearly jump to the Midnight Express versus the Southern Boys. But if you're going by timestamp, it is 45:20 into the broadcast. And with that said, we'll do what we did last time. We will count down from 5 and then press play. Don't press play on 1. We will say to press play after 1.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, play. Right,
but that wasn't the cue. That is an example of the cue that I will give momentarily.
Yes.
Jim, are you ready?
I'm ready.
With that said, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, press play.
And here we go. And you will notice this is the Baltimore Civic Center, later the Baltimore Arena. They're trying to copy Vince and the WWF, that giant fucking ramp all the way from the back. I hated this. Look, it looks like we're in a fucking warehouse. Look at that piss poor pyro, giant ramp with nobody on either side. We used to come to the ring surrounded by people. Yes, it was dangerous, especially for the heels, but this is completely the opposite direction. We should have come through the people with them making fucking noise and blah, blah, blah. It would have been more exciting, but they just walk to the ring and step in it. I hated this. The ramp got in the way when we, as you'll see here with our opening spot. But there's Steve Armstrong, Trace Smothers on the other side, the world's most dangerous announcer, Gary Michael Capetta in the ring. And now here we come. And that was the Southern Boys music that they picked, by the way, this network stuff. But this is the generic midnight music, which covers up the original miscue. We had to go because they're still not playing our fucking music. We're halfway down this ramp. We're jogging because there's no music. Then suddenly it starts coming in. They were late on it. And we said, fuck it. We're almost there anyway. But it just, I hated this ramp and the whole look of the thing. And that off-brand shot for no reason. Bad switch. They were trying to chase Vince and they couldn't do it. And then you will notice that almost all of the camera people, the floor cameras, are standing on the apron of the ring, shooting at the same level as the guys, there's Mike, or shooting down, which makes the bumps look smaller and less impressive. They were getting in over their heads with trying to chase the WWF. Bobby almost didn't notice the high five. Now, what we were going to do was jumpstart them, dust them up, chuck them out on the floor, and then go out after them and let the Southern Boys fire up on the floor, do a chase scene around the fucking ring, and goddamn get back in the ring and let Southern Boys be cooking. But once they got chucked out on the floor, we realized, number one, they go out there, the Southern Boys get excited and just start fucking throwing taters. And Bobby says, I can't go. I'm stuck with the ramp over here. And he got jammed up and the people were not with it anyway. Stan just bailed out. Bobby said, shoot me off and give me something. And we're going to slow this fucking down. So far, but the Southern Boys would not slow down, by the way. Double shoulder tackle. And there we go. Let me get the fuck out of here. And Stan takes 2 taters and says, what the fuck? All right. They're excited. The people are not real up. We're going to slow things down a little bit because we've got 20 minutes. That one didn't work. All right.
The WWF did not have a single referee with a mustache. Post Tommy Young, every WCW referee had a mustache.
Well, I think Mike was Nick Patrick's brother-in-law, now that I'm thinking about it. So they kind of looked alike. But anywho, Steve starts out first. And Steve was like every Armstrong. He could fucking work and he was so athletic. But Bullet had everything. And by the way, and the floor cameraman would not get off of my shoulder. He would not. It wasn't even Jackie Crockett. He wouldn't leave me alone. But Bullet had everything. Brad got the real pure work. Steve was the athlete. Scott was the fucking promo till Road Dogg came along. Road Dogg didn't get the physique, but he got the personality. But every one of the kids had something else. And I don't know why Steve put his hand on the top of Bobby's head on that lockup, but he had a different kind of lockup. But watch Bobby and bing! He comes from nowhere and the shit looks good and you never feel it. At this point, he figures, well, let's see if we can light him up a little bit. Give Steve a chance to foil a top rope move. Boom! Off to the fucking, on a slam. And here, I hate this angle. See this angle? It makes everybody look short. Love that flying fucking monkey flip. But do you see when the handheld cameras are at that level, all the bumps look small, the drop kicks don't look big. You should be pointing up at it. Steve forgot. He's supposed to drop kick, go up to the top. But he smoothly turned around and, shit. And there's that clothesline. And where are we going to go now? Bobby's like, fuck, they're still not warming up to this. You can see the people, small smattering of applause. I think, I don't know what I'm telling him there. Possibly, I'm telling him I'm going to kill this fucking cameraman if he don't get off my back. Because I really didn't have any room for real. Anyway.
You still have that outfit?
I still have that outfit on my wall. Yes, I do.
I think I just saw John Arezzi in the crowd.
You may very well have. I'm sure he was there. Okay, nice little tag to Tracy. Let's get Trace in. And the double wind up, and a double chop. Boom. Tracy already at this point, you can see when he moves around, Steve was, like I said, more athletic. Tracy was a more solid worker all the way around. And you could depend on him not to get too far afield. And this is literally a real conference because remember, I've got my watch on. I'm keeping time. I don't think the referees were wired at this point. I don't think that we had IFBs. I think they took their cues from the timekeeper at ringside if he held up a pin or whatever, but you'd get a go-home cue from the referee. But I always like to not leave anything to chance, so I had the watch on and I was keeping time on our matches. Tracy with the drop down, but boom, Bobby goes low. Crossing him up a little bit just to give him a chance to do a little running spot. And here we go. Now we're going to set up Tracy's karate. Back fist and fucking kick to the head. And now, actually, that was not as extreme as the stuff Steve was doing, but it got a little bit better response from the people because it was just kind of unexpected.
And how much had you guys worked with the Southern Boys already by this point?
I'd have to get the Midnight Express book out, and I forgot to do that, but not extensively. We had a couple matches with them when they bought Florida in '87. At that point, and then they'd just been in here just a short time. This may have been one of the first ones. We like I said, Stan helped train Tracy and break him in. So we knew him, and Armstrong's an Armstrong. They can do anything. You just sit down and say, what's your best shit? Now watch Bobby again. The old Luthez elbow to the side of the fucking face with the slap, and bam, another couple. And
told Randy Atkins to shut up.
Yeah,
Mike Atkins.
Mike, yeah, you're the Randy Anderson. I wish we'd have had Pee Wee. And boom, and another kick right to the face. And I'm like, fucking holy shit. And Stan is screaming, goddamn, give him to me. Give him to me. Now, everybody knows from the past 3 years, Stan's the karate guy. He does the karate kicks. This is how you set a spot up to pay off later. You don't have to just do endless motion. And Stan had springs in his legs. He was so smooth. You don't have to do endless motion. You got to give them something they understand. Tracy Smothers has kicked Bobby Eaton's teeth down his throat twice with these karate kicks. So now we're going to get the karate guy in. Let's see what the fuck happens. They're interested in this story we're telling. This is where we start to get them, as you will hear when you listen to it with the sound. And, of course, once again, we've got a black belt in Shotokan, and I think Tracy took some Taekwondo at one point. And Stan got a black belt in the 70s. So this doesn't have to be goddamn Jackie Chan. Just tell the fucking story. And Stan said, bang, bam, yeah, hot shot.
Fans are starting to react.
They're starting to come up a little bit. And watch Stan's face. Oh, shit. Now he goes from yeah to oh, shit, and a boom, boom, boom. The baby face gives you back what, and he was not far enough out on the kick, but he got one on Bobby and almost got one on me. That's what instantly the baby face gives the heel back in a quick succession. Look at those people now. Quick succession, everything the heel has given him over the past few minutes plus better, boom, and then everybody fucking reacts to it. That's a spot payoff. We took from 51:30 to 54 minutes to set that up and pay it off, and now the people are starting to say, well, these fucking kids, they ain't that bad, the Southern Boys. And they've got the Midnight Express going. This is more than we thought it was going to be. That's the story you're trying to tell. Now Stan's got to redeem himself, right? So let's settle this fucking thing down a little bit. Hold on here.
Hey, why is Apter at ringside and Linda Rufus behind the barricade?
I guess Bill knew somebody. Anyway, look at now. Stan is going to let the baby face out wrestle him, but look at Stan's aggression. He's trying to figure out drop toe hold. I've got him now. I've got him, and he floats right over, and Tracy gets the fucking hammerlock. Stan's trying to find a way out of this. Finally goes to the fucking face. You take over, Bobby. And the way that they've done that is Stan has told Tracy, as soon as I tag out, arm drag Bobby. When he goes over and he tags Bobby, he just says arm drag. Bobby comes in immediately, takes an arm drag. This is being called as it happens. We didn't know what the fuck. We had Steve's big clothesline crossbody thing. We had the karate spot. We've got the big spot that the baby faces are going to do shortly, and our heat spot. Elsewise, everything's just fucking happening.
Bobby has the best right hand.
Yeah. And boom, and Tracy right over the top, and boom. This was different stuff than all the other baby faces were doing. So, and watch this. Tracy did this. He used to like to do this sometimes. And the people kind of fucking got with it. Backflip in and drop kick out.
Like you said, it was unique at the time, but also unique amongst the babyface tag teams. Rock and Roll Express. You have the Steiner brothers. The Southern Boys stood out because they were different.
And now, once again, the Midnight Express, Stan stops him. Now we're going into the big baby face's fucking spot. This is the big baby face spot before the heat spot. Shoot Tracy off double elbow, nail Steve. He's down on the floor. Now, if we can get Mike Adkins out of the way, we're going to shoot Tracy away from his partner. He ducks Bobby, rolls under Stan. Here comes Steve. Holy shit, what a fucking high cross body. And now we're doing the midget spot. We don't know who's going to fin, who's going to cover whatever the fuck. It's bullshit. And heels head first together. Meeting of the minds, get out, let the baby faces shit. Now the people are going crazy for the baby faces. Now we've done exactly what we needed to do. And I tell Bobby in about 10 seconds, you can hear me say, it's time to do something. That's cue for the heat. As a matter of fact, it'll be right here. Time to do something. Now we're going to do the heat spot, and everybody knows it's coming. We've got them up as far as we can, the people. We've put as much credibility in the baby faces as kicking our ass as we can. So now we got to pull the rug out from under them. When the people are up as high as they're going to go and the baby faces are rolling, pull it right out from under them. If this had been the Rock and Roll Express, we'd have gone right into it. But we hadn't had as many matches with the Southern Boys, and they weren't as experienced. We couldn't call everything as quick, so just take a little break. Now we're doing our heat spot, Tracy. Here we go. Everybody knows where they're supposed to be. Boom. Here's a tag. Tracy didn't see it. I got the referee. Stan throws him over the top. I jumped down. That would be a disqualification if the referee had seen it. As I jump down, I tell him, get that other baby face where Stan can rough Tracy up on the fucking railway or railing. But the point is, and now look at the people. And now the people are halfway booing us where they were cheering us before because we had to fucking cheat to stop these kids. And at the same time, I only had the referee distracted 5 to 10 seconds for Tracy to get chucked over the top. And there's one little more distraction for a racket shot. One time I interfere in the match with the racket. Because fuck it.
Did Ole say anything to you afterwards?
No. He said don't interfere in the finish.
That's true.
But anyway, I got stuck here because Steve was like, fuck, I got to do something. And the referee had to get out there. So anyway... and Tracy took a hell of a fucking spill against the railing again. And now he started to get a little sympathy because people went, ooh, at that because it looked like it hurt him. But that's the point. You have to fucking pull the rug out from under the people on the heat spot as quickly as possible and change the momentum entirely. And now we start doing the double team stuff. Ass bump into the fucking backbreaker. Boom. Nobody knows how to do a fucking ass bump anymore, much less into a backbreaker, which they also don't know how to do anymore. And this, once again, when you're getting the heat on the babyface, you've got to have him fight from underneath like Tracy's doing. Boom. Bobby liked that spinning from the left side clothesline, and you didn't have no choice but to go. I just gave Bobby a time cue there, I think. But you've got to put them in a hold once in a while so they can have pain on their face and they can struggle and they can writhe, and you can see them fucking in pain, and then you hit them with another move. And the impact, and then you let them see the guy's face again or see that they're in a predicament or whatever. You don't just keep picking them up and hitting them with shit and running them all over the place. Stan roughing Tracy up here, but I believe we're within a minute or so of having to go. I hate these camera angles. I like this one, hate the other ones. Tracy firing up, trying to fight to the tag. Steve trying to reach. He's got his hand on the buckle, can't make it. And now here's where Bobby's got to give him something off the top that he connects on, right? But when he hits the Alabama Jam, boom! He bounces up and he's hurt himself. And shit, he don't know what the fuck. And instead of covering, now he's got to tag out. It didn't fucking kill the move, but it still fucking hurt Tracy, right? So now Stan can fucking gloat, do all the fucking shit that Stan did, and fucking just let everybody in the front row sees. And also he's calling something. He just called, I think, Sunset Flip. Yes. Because now, boom, there's another hope spot. The babyface is still alive. Now he's got to go try to fight to the tag, but no, we're going to cut him off again. And now, boom, another double team. Really see, the pace is picking up now from where before they'd hit him in the backbreaker and put him in the hole, but now it's starting to pick up a little bit because you can't go 100 miles an hour and then finish the race at 60. Bobby's going to set up for a little something he wants to do here.
Now you got away from him. Normally you would have done something there, right?
Well, it's because Bobby was doing something. I can't fuck anything up here because Bobby's setting something up. What he's setting up, he tags and he fucking slingshots the babyface in, even though Tracy wasn't quite sure. I don't think he'd ever done that before. But Bobby's telling him what to do. So now he had tagged and slingshotted Tracy in, and Stan gives Tracy a bump. Cover, 1, 2, kick out. He's going to tag out again. Bobby's going to say, well, it worked the first time. God damn, we'll put him out on the floor. He just says, take a bump out. And this time, he's going to set the same thing up, but it's going to backfire. And he's going to get pulled out over the top. And it's going to give Tracy the chance to come in and fucking get stopped by Stan. But now Bobby's on the floor. So people are up a little bit with now it's just Stan against Tracy. Can Tracy make the tag? Oh, shit. Tracy stopped Stan. Bing, 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 bing. Little fucking facial gouge there. And I've just told Bobby, we got to go. Time for the fucking tag. And so there's a brief little fucking tag in, boom, there, because they've got to make sure the fucking tag is in the right, for the right guy to be legal and etc. That's why they did that. Nobody would know if they weren't looking for it. Tracy double sunset flips both fucking guys. Squirm, roll. Here comes Steve. Oh, shit. Heels put on the brakes. No, please. Just babyface stands in the middle of the ring and the fucking heels feed. Babyface doesn't have to go anywhere. When he shoots one off, he's going to do the double head coconuts again, but he shoots one off. Babyface still in the middle of the ring. Heel fucking bumps away from him. Now he's supposed to cover. He just thought for a second. And now Tracy makes the save on Bobby. Gets him out of the fucking way. Stan's still legal. This is their finish, the Southern Boys finish. They've won every match that people have seen them win with this move. And boom, that's where Atkins is supposed to go down to count. But he is distracted quick by something he shouldn't be distracted by. Go count, goddammit. Well, now Stan said, fuck it, I'm kicking anyway. Now take Tracy out, Mike. Thank you. That's what should have happened. But still, the people fucking bought it. Steve's going to go up to put him away. Bobby pushes him off, throat first to the fucking top rope. Now here comes Bobby up to the top. People have seen this 100,000 times, the rocket launcher. Okay, it was a great match, but this one's going to be it. Boom. And once again, count, Mike. Thank you.
People are all standing now.
The people are standing up. If we didn't have a green referee, I'd love it, because I was going, that's where I was like, motherfucker, you think you get this one? Okay. Tracy and Steve have just switched places. They're wearing identical outfits. Steve was rolled out. Tracy's there. Small package. People thought that was it. No. Here goes Stan. Gets nailed out on the fucking floor. Bobby's going to shoot Tracy to the other side and drop down. There's the kick to the fucking head. And there's the goddamn small package. And Mike turns around 1, 2, 3. And boom, that was it. So we gave them 4 or 5 really nice false finishes that would have been even better if the referee had cooperated by counting on them. And then gave them only shitty finish. And look at the people. They're all standing up and they're all fucking clapping.
And you guys did end up stealing the show.
And we did end up stealing the show, but it was petty theft. And if you'll go by I think the replay is coming up here shortly. This actually looked better than I thought it was going to look. Watch how Tracy sells this. Bam! Even though Stan hit him, and instead of the back, he hit him on the sides, and Tracy sold the back of his head and into the fucking deal. It's a wrestling move. That was a good thing to end with. The fly in the ointment came on the 2 false finishes when we just were going too fast for the inexperienced referee, and he couldn't keep up with when he was supposed to count and then take somebody back. But we got by with it.
Now's a good time to stop the video, because it's the glammed up Freebirds here. No one needs to see this.
It's the fucking Freebirds meet T-Rex, and Mark Bolan did their makeup. And that's a good place, to stop it. But anyway, that was a match that accomplished what we set out to do. Not only to have a good match, but to get over by winning, to fuck the baby faces, to give them an out, to give the unfamiliar baby faces a great match to increase the fans' perception of them. And even though we weren't being featured on television, steal the show from every other contracted talent, many of whom were being paid much more money than we were. So on all accounts, that worked out.
And it was the longest match on the show. Was that what it was supposed to be?
Yeah, well, that we didn't go over time. They gave us 20 minutes. We took 20 minutes. So it's not our fault. The rest of them couldn't keep up with all of us.
You know what we have to do one of these days? I'd love to hear you do commentary over Halloween Havoc 90.
Oh, good God.
It's a good match. It's a good match.
We'll do that for Halloween.
Okay.
Well, yeah, actually, here's the goddamn thing of it is, everybody, when they look back, the makeshift match where Robert Gibson was hurt and we wrestled Ricky Morton and Tommy Rich in the curtain jerker and lost was the best match on that show. So, I don't know. Anyway, nevertheless, that's a tag team watch along. See, that's why you listen to this program, folks. That's why you join the Patreon. Jim Cornette's College of Wrestling Knowledge. You get the insight. You see the little things. And then you understand how the little things stay little things until people make big things out of them. Right?
Well, on that note, once again, patreon.com/Cornette to access classic episodes of The Experience and the Drive Thru. Another batch of episodes goes up each and every Sunday evening. Don't forget the official Jim Cornette YouTube channel. Go to YouTube and search for Jim Cornette. Get video. I have the song still in my head. You can get clips of the shows, full episodes, as well as omnibus collections. The official Jim Cornette YouTube channel. Don't forget the Experience debuts on Friday, wherever you find your favorite podcast. And of course, we'll be back next week here on the Drive-Thru on our normal Monday release schedule. You can follow Jim on Twitter at @TheJimCornette. You can follow me on Twitter at GreatBrianLast. You can hear me on the 605 Superpodcast. 605pod.com are available wherever it is that you find your favorite podcasts. Cornette's Collectibles, just hold off and wait a little while, and then the play sets and everything else will be there
Well, they have to hold off. The store's closed right now, but a couple weeks, mid-July, will be grand opening time.
But there's always great articles and all sorts of things at JimCornette.com that they can check out while they're waiting for the store to open up.
Yes, there is.
So once again,
Don't just hang out on the street. Come into the website, check a few things out, wait for the store to open.
Don't forget the drive-thru is brought to you by the law office of Stephen P. New, 888-692-8084. Get even with Stephen at newlawoffice.com. But until Friday on The Experience, I think we're going to do another week of NXT versus AEW.
That's correct.
And next week, right here in the drive-thru, who knows what that show will be. For Jim Cornette, I'm the great Brian Last. Tally-ho!